The young lady raced down the grand marble corridor, her nanny's frantic scolding echoing after her. Proper young women did not run, she had been told countless times, but her heart was deaf to such lessons. Today was different. Today, Duke Alexavier Agnes, the man whose name filled gossip and whose portrait adorned newspapers, was arriving at their estate. But fate tripped her steps, and she collided headfirst into a stranger. When she looked up, breath caught in her throat, it was him. The Duke himself. His voice was gentle, concerned, and far more dazzling than rumor had ever promised. Golden hair framed his sharp features, and though his eyes were feared by many, she saw only quiet depth. Their first meeting, however, was nothing like the graceful daydreams she had imagined. Her nanny soon caught up, scolding her lack of etiquette and even teasing about the scrapbook of clippings she secretly kept of the Duke. Bernice flushed crimson, clinging to her nanny's skirt in protest. But the moment shattered when her father appeared, his presence heavy and stern. With cutting words, he demanded progress in her training, dismissing even the nanny's defense with threats of the dungeon. Bernice bowed her head, trembling as she apologized, though tears escaped the moment he left. To her, her father had never been warm, only sharp, demanding, unreachable. The days that followed offered no reprieve. At dawn, the mansion stirred with panic. Nanny's pale face revealed the truth, the Marquis had suffered a devastating loss. Ruin loomed over them, house, fortune, and name. Bernice's chest tightened. Excalibur, her little brother, was still so young. He deserved more than disgrace. When she sought her father, fear weighing each step, he confirmed the worst, bankruptcy. Yet his calm resolve startled her. Beneath his harsh exterior, there was a trace of care she had never seen before. He spoke of duty, of Excalibur's future, of Bernice's role. Desperate to help, she offered up her land, but he refused. Instead, his command was final, she must marry. The word struck like thunder. Marriage, not for love, but survival. She tried to resist, insisting she only wished to stay with her family, but her father silenced her. The groom was chosen, the wedding set for tomorrow. Shaken, she poured her grief into her nanny's arms, the mansion around her transforming overnight into a hall dressed for vows she had never desired. Yet when the moment came, and her father led her down the aisle, his face softened for the first time. Pride glowed in his eyes as he placed her hand into that of her husband-to-be. And there stood Duke Alexavier Agnes. The man she had admired from afar was now her groom. The ceremony blurred past her, his steady, I do, her trembling echo, the kiss upon her cheek. Not fiery romance, but restrained, distant. Still, her father laughed softly in the pews, and by the ceremony's end, she was no longer the Marquis's daughter but the Duchess of Agnes. When Alexavier offered his hand, she took it eagerly, only for him to ride separately on horseback. Close, yet far. The unease weighed heavy as they arrived at his grand estate. The butler bowed low, the staff whispered, and Bernice forced herself to meet each courtesy with grace. The halls were magnificent, the chambers vast, and her new room, draped in blue, seemed to reflect the very shade of the Duke's eyes. Baths were drawn, gowns prepared, and the maids left her with words that made her blush. We have prepared you for your first night with the Duke. Heart racing, she waited. But hours passed. The chamber remained silent. Loneliness pressed down on her until she slipped into the dark halls, only to find them desolate and cold. Returning in tears, she cursed herself for weeping, scolding her weakness even as exhaustion pulled her under. When dawn came, the Duke was waiting at the breakfast table as though nothing had been amiss. He greeted her casually, and she replied with strained politeness. His questions met only curt answers. When letters bearing her family's seal arrived, she seized them, abandoning her untouched meal. The Duke said nothing, his indifference sharper than any insult. Back in her chambers, she remembered the wound on her ankle, raw from tearing off her anklet in despair. The sting was nothing compared to the hollowness inside her chest. For though she was now a duchess, she felt more alone than she had ever been before. 6 months had passed since Bernice had become Duchess of Agnes, yet the Duke had never once crossed the threshold of her chambers. Their exchanges were limited to brief greetings over breakfast and dinner, polite on the surface but hollow underneath. And still, some foolish part of her clung to the hope that one day he might open her door and say softly, "Madam, sorry I'm late." Instead, when he summoned her to his study for the first time, she entered with a racing heart only to hear him command, "It is time you fulfill your duties as Duchess." The fragile hope within her shattered. She agreed without protest, hiding the ache behind a calm smile, but when he asked if there was anything he could do for her, the question cut deeper than his indifference ever had. She answered, nothing, then fled with unsteady steps. Determined not to break again, Bernice threw herself into the estate's work, demanding all the documents from the butler. He revealed that the duties once belonged to the Duke's late mother, and that both of his parents had been murdered years ago. Their killer had never been caught, though Alexavier still sought justice with the Emperor's aid. Bernice, with clear eyes, murmured that the Emperor was a man who used nobles as pawns. The butler's startled silence told her she had spoken too boldly. At dinner, her misstep returned to haunt her. She mentioned his parents too carelessly, and the Duke's fury struck like a whip. His hand slammed against the table, his eyes dark with rage. Shaken, she apologized, but he left without another word, leaving her humiliated before the household staff. That night, darkness consumed the mansion. Alone and panicked, she stumbled through black halls until a blade cut across her back. Pain exploded, another strike felled her to the floor. A stranger's laughter echoed in the dark as steel pierced her stomach. With blood flooding her mouth, she whispered for the Duke, for anyone, but no one came. Her last thought before the world went silent was desperate, I don't want to die. When she awoke, sunlight bathed her room, and her nanny's voice scolded her as if she were still a child. The mirror confirmed the truth, she was 16 again, a year before her ill-fated marriage. Tears streamed down her face as she embraced her father and younger brother, clinging to their warmth. Yet in her heart, a vow crystallized. She would never marry Alexavier Agnes. She would never love him again. If fate dared place him before her, she would not bow, she would make him feel the pain she had endured. But even as days passed, the phantom ache of her death lingered. The memory of the blade in her flesh haunted her until she turned her gaze to the knights training in the courtyard. Something inside her stirred. That was the strength she needed. That was the path forward. Ignoring her nanny's protests, she marched into the yard and demanded to spar. The knights stared in shock as she challenged one of their own, Sir Xylan Einar. He mocked her, certain it was a joke, until he placed a sword in her trembling hands. The weight was crushing, her palms slick with sweat, but she refused to yield. Every clash of steel reminded her of the night she had died. Fear hardened into fury. With a final strike, she disarmed him, leaving both of them breathless. Humbled, Xylan admitted her talent and offered to teach her if the Marquis allowed it. Bernice seized that promise as though it were lifeblood. She tore through her chambers, ripping apart every letter and memory she had once hoarded of Alexavier. With tears streaming down her face, she declared she would never love him again. She would become strong, strong enough to carve her own fate. When her father summoned her soon after, she knew Xylan had already spoken on her behalf. This meeting would decide her future. And with fire burning in her chest, Bernice walked toward the Marquis's study, resolved to begin her new path, the path of the sword. Bernice entered her father's study with steady steps, though her heart churned with fire. The Marquis regarded her from behind his desk, Sir Xylan standing beside him, and Excalibur shifting nervously in sweat-stained training clothes. You wish to learn swordsmanship? Her father asked. Yes, father, she answered firmly. I am prepared to lose everything if it means I can wield a sword. And more than that, I wish to compete with Excalibur for the succession. The words stunned the room. Even Excalibur tugged at her dress, whispering that swords hurt, showing her his blistered palms. She only smiled gently. That's the pain I want to feel. Dismissed of witnesses, the Marquis pressed her again, warning her of the cost, demanding the truth she withheld. She confessed only her determination, not the memories that haunted her. At last, he relented, scrawling his approval across parchment. With trembling fingers, she seized the signed seal, laughter and defiance rising in her throat as she tore her skirts with his dagger and ran from the study. Training began at once. Sir Xylan pressed her mercilessly, his wooden sword striking with unyielding precision. She staggered, sweat soaking her clothes, but each harsh word only lit her resolve. Even when she collapsed, she spat defiance, demanding acknowledgement for lasting 3 hours without rest. Xylan smirked, promising to be gentler tomorrow, a promise that sounded more like a threat. Dragged from the yard to her history lessons, Bernice wrapped herself in her father's coat to hide her disheveled state. There, she learned the story of Alexavier's parents, the Duke and Duchess of the North. The Duchess had once been the Emperor's blood sister, destined for greatness, until she was exiled north under a treaty and slain in a supposed carriage accident. Rumors whispered of murder, of a drowned driver, of threads carefully cut. Bernice's hand tightened around her quill. So that's why Alexavier clings to the Emperor. 6 months passed. She excelled in her lessons, often surpassing her brother, yet the nights brought no peace. Each evening she woke to the same torment, a man's anguished voice shouting her name, demanding her salvation. Sleep left her hollow-eyed and trembling, until at last she confessed to her father. His silence, his unease at the mention of her mother, revealed more than his words. In the end, he promised to take her to the imperial doctor, though she knew his true intent was the temple. The journey to the temple carried the weight of both dread and hope. Excalibur's warmth against her hands softened the edges, but unease surged the moment she crossed the threshold. Stepping into the sacred pool, light engulfed her, and she found herself in the realm of the gods, a radiant sword pressed into her hands. The lunar god himself spoke, calling her Bernice Alexavier Agnes, declaring her the holy knight of the empire. Fury consumed her. She rejected the name, the sword, the destiny. Why should she bend to gods who had stood idle as she bled to death once before? She mocked him, spitting out her defiance, yet the title clung to her like chains. When the vision broke, she was drenched in trembling, priests whispering of curses cleansed. But Bernice knew the truth. This was no blessing, only another burden forced upon her. Questions seared her mind. Where had this God been in her darkest hour? Did he look away, or was he complicit? Her father wrapped her in his coat, his warmth briefly steadying her. Yet as they neared the carriage, a deeper chill seized her heart. Memories and dread crashed over her, dragging her back to the moment of betrayal. She clutched her father's sleeve, trembling like a child. "It hurts," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Father, I want to leave." Bernice clung to her father's sleeve, trembling like a child as the temple's air seemed to close in on her. Her eyes weren't on him, but on the tall figure approaching, Alexavier Agnes, Duke of the North. Her husband. Her father greeted him with practiced composure, but Bernice could barely manage a broken stammer. Memory suffocated her, the nights of silence, the lonely hours of waiting, the coldness that had once been her only company. When Alexavier stepped closer, concern flickering in his eyes, she recoiled violently. "Don't touch me," she cried, before fleeing to the carriage. There, she confessed to her father in a hollow voice. She could not bear the Duke's presence. He reminded her too much of the coldness she once admired and then came to dread. If her succession troubled him, she said bitterly, she would stop her classes, abandon the sword, do whatever he wished. He placed a hand on her head, whispering that as long as she was content, it was enough. Yet Bernice knew it was a fragile lie. What she truly wanted was to live on her own terms, and she would not allow even the gods to strip that away. But fate tested her resolve again the next morning. Still shaken from nightmares, she was told the Duke himself had come to call. Forced into her father's coat, still clad in training clothes, she faced him in the drawing room. To her surprise, his questions were not distant or cold, but searching. Why had she shown this side of herself to him? Did he do something wrong? His tone unsettled her. It was unlike the man she remembered. When he pressed about her swordsmanship, she admitted the truth. She wielded a blade, not to revel in bloodshed, but to protect herself, her family, the ones she loved. "Unlike you, whose victories are drenched in blood, I fight for something different," she declared. His lips curved faintly, almost teasing, and his words lingered in her chest far longer than she wished. The fragile control she clung to shattered when she later stormed into her father's office, fury blazing. She demanded answers, and the Marquis gave them. She must marry Duke Alexavier Agnes. The arrangement had already been made. Within a week, the ceremony would take place. "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "I don't want this marriage." But her protests fell against iron. And when she fled the office, she ran straight into Alexavier himself. His words were calm, almost gentle, too gentle. He bowed before her, declaring he would do so for hours or days if need be, because she was his bride-to-be. Her chest ached. "Why now? Why act as though you care, when you left me to wither before?" She demanded to know why he was being so kind. He only looked at her with that quiet intensity, the same unsettling shift she could not explain. It was not the Duke she remembered, and that frightened her even more. Training brought no escape. Sir Xylan's merciless drills left her bloodied and breathless, but still she pushed on, claiming her pain as her choice. When Alexavier arrived at the yard, his sharp concern sparked a clash between him and Xylan. Bernice silenced them both, declaring that every wound was hers to bear. "You have no right to interfere," she told Alexavier coldly, turning her back on him. But her reprieve was short-lived. Summoned once more to her father's study, she found him seated with Alexavier. The truth came swiftly. They were bankrupt. Everything, lands, fortune, even the mansion, was lost. The Duke's hand had been extended to save them, but only in exchange for her hand. Her heart went cold. In her last life, she had believed the marriage was for her sake. Now, stripped of illusion, she saw it for what it was, a bargain, a sale. No tears came, only emptiness. "Fine," she said. "I will marry him." On the day of the wedding, there was no grandeur, no festivity, only necessity. Her father walked her down the aisle in his old wedding suit, pride dimmed by exhaustion. The vows passed like echoes of a life she had already lived. When the priest called for a kiss, she whispered that his forehead would suffice. Alexavier obliged, his lips brushing lightly against her skin. Her heart thundered, torn between fear and a fragile, dangerous hope. Can I change this life? She wondered as she stood beside him. Or am I only walking into the same fate once more? Bernice stood frozen at the altar, her heart racing as Alexavier's lips brushed her forehead. But before relief could settle, the statue of God Lunar erupted in golden light, flooding the chapel with a divine, crushing presence. The world shifted. Once more, Bernice stood in the cloudy realm where Lunar lingered. Her anger boiled. Why drag me here again? Do you enjoy tormenting me? The god's calm voice echoed, claiming he only watched over his children. But her rage struck harder than his serenity. Where were those eyes when I bled to death? Where was your divinity then? For once, he faltered. She hurled the words like blades. Do you even have power? Or are you nothing but a forgotten god who manipulates his pawns? He endured the scorn before offering temptation. She could end her marriage, take the mantle of holy knight, and never meet her blood-soaked fate again. Bernice's heart stuttered at the memory of blades piercing her flesh, but she spat her refusal. I will not be your knight. His voice sharpened. Then stay away from your husband, or you will regret it. Before she could demand what he meant, the cloudy realm dissolved, and Alex Xavier's worried face hovered above her. She deflected with a shrug, hiding her trembling heart. Home, he called his mansion, but to her the word felt like chains. The gates of Ablia loomed before her, whispers of the crowd cutting sharper than knives. She's plain. Not fit for him. Did she force him with magic? He could have had any princess. Bernice clenched her fists, fighting the sting. Inside, the butler Grant introduced her maid, Una, who welcomed her as Duchess Bernice Baliol Agnes. The title felt like shackles. Coldly, she demanded a contract between herself and Alex Xavier. If their marriage was convenience, then it would be bound by rules, privacy, respect, and divorce after a year. His gaze lingered on that last word. Divorce. The frown that shadowed his face was almost unsettled. And what if I don't agree? Bernice met his question with one of her own. Why cling to her when there was no benefit, no love? Alex Xavier's answer was simple, duty. He had promised her father to care for her, and he would honor that vow. But Bernice cut deeper, confessing what she had never intended to reveal. She had been chosen by God Lunar to be the Holy Knight. The words tumbled from her lips like a curse. His surprise was brief. He had already noticed an aura around her luggage. Panic drove her through the halls, tearing open trunks until a silver glow nearly blinded her. Nestled among her things lay the holy sword itself. The moment her blood touched its edge, a mark bloomed on her neck, and the blade spoke. From this moment, you are my master. My name is Arios. Shock threatened to crush her. The god's schemes, her rebirth, the chains of fate, it all tangled into one impossible truth. Arios alone answered her fury. When she demanded why he had not saved her, he confessed, he had tried. Her dying scream had summoned him, but the god of fate, Moirai, had sealed him away. Only her rebirth had broken the chains. Her blood ran cold. If even fate itself had intervened, then her return was no blessing, but a defiance the gods would not forgive. Still, Arios urged her onward. The gods were gentle faces, but behind them they are predators. Be wary. Almost gently, he added, if you wish, I can take human form. Bernice blinked, stunned, as the sword's glow condensed into a boy no taller than her waist. Wide-eyed, cherubic, he looked up at her with earnest devotion. Master, can't you recognize me? Her heart stuttered. Arios. Before she could marvel, Alex Xavier's knock startled them both. Reluctantly, she allowed him in. The boy spoke boldly in her stead, earning Alex Xavier's drawn sword at his throat. Stop. Bernice shielded him. This is Arios, the holy sword. Though skeptical, Alex Xavier yielded when she asked that the boy remain. You are the Duchess. The decision is yours, he said simply, the words striking her unexpectedly deep. But Arios sneered, provoking the Duke further by naming his hidden blade, Noxus. For the first time, Alex Xavier faltered, shock flashing across his usually stoic face. Rage nearly consumed them both until Bernice's voice cracked the tension. Enough. Her head pounded, Arios offered to heal it, and Alex Xavier's disbelief grew at the revelation that the sword could read her thoughts. Desperate for control, Bernice silenced the boy with a threat to sever their bond. Only then did quiet return. But Alex Xavier's gaze lingered, intense, searching. Madam, speak your mind. Whatever you're hiding, say it. Her thoughts raced. She could not explain Arios truthfully without shattering everything. At last, cheeks burning, she muttered, Duke, could you introduce him as your nephew? Alex Xavier tilted his head. My nephew? Yes. Unless, her voice faltered. Unless you'd rather I introduce him as my son. Bernice's suggestion that Arios might be introduced as her son struck a nerve. Alex Xavier's sudden outburst startled her. She hadn't thought such a remark could wound his pride. Lowering her gaze, she apologized softly, admitting she hadn't considered the disgrace it might cast upon him. He gave no reply, only turned away in silence. Left alone, Bernice stroked Arios's silver hair, confessing she wasn't fit to wield him. Yet the boy only looked at her with eyes that reflected blood and secrets. Their quiet was broken by Una's knock, her insistent voice pulling Bernice's temper taut. When the maid persisted, Bernice's patience snapped. Catching her eavesdropping, she dragged the girl by the hair, her voice cold and dangerous, warning she would kill if pushed too far. Servants gathered, gasping at the scene, but Bernice's glare silenced them all. The head maid arrived, chastising her for being too harsh. When Bernice's authority was questioned, something within her shattered. With monstrous strength, she lifted the woman by the throat, declaring herself the Duchess and no one's subordinate. The hall erupted in chaos, servants pleading for the Duke to save them when he appeared. Bernice released the maid, then demanded Alexavier tell her plainly, did she have any privacy, any authority at all as his wife? The servants shrieked accusations, but before more could be said, silence fell. Blood pooled at Bernice's feet. The maids lay lifeless, Alexavier's blade dripping crimson. The lunar god's voice slithered into her mind, taunting her with the horror she had just witnessed. He pressed again for her to become his knight, but she defied him bitterly, rejecting his twisted offer of salvation. When his voice faded, Alexavier remained before her, smiling as though nothing had happened. You may do whatever you wish in this place. There will be no one left to disturb you, he said, before leaving the room. Grant escorted her to her quarters, but separated her from Arios. Through their bond, the boy confessed his fear of Alexavier and his sword, Noxua, describing a suffocating darkness drenched in blood. The warning left Bernice uneasy. That night, a new maid was assigned to her, Vix, a timid girl whose gentle service softened the sharp edges of Bernice's exhaustion. The bath soothed her into slumber, but when she woke, moonlight revealed she wasn't alone. Alexavier stood in her chamber, reminding her it was their wedding night. The word stung. In her past life, he had never once crossed her threshold. Now he spoke of appearances, of respect. She lashed back, accusing him of using her, of binding her in a marriage she had never chosen. She begged only for freedom when the year ended. When she pressed him on his true reason for marrying her, he faltered. For the first time, he spoke her name with quiet intensity, claiming she already knew the answer. Her heart raced, but suspicion gnawed deeper. He admitted it was not love, but necessity. Someone needed to shoulder the Duchess's role while he sought the truth behind his parents' murder. Bernice's fear spiked as she spoke too freely, yet she covered her mistake with bold words about history and rumor. He urged her not to dig deeper, but irritation simmered inside her. Her voice broke as she reminded him she had been sold into this marriage, her tears hidden beneath a brittle smile. The moment shattered when Arios stormed in, sweat and fury blazing across his face. He demanded to know if Alexavier had hurt her, offering to strike him down if he had. Their confrontation was sharp and venomous, Arios declaring that only Bernice had the right to speak his name, not the Duke. Bernice stood between them, caught in the storm, her mind spinning with unspoken questions. What bound Alexavier and Arios in such venom? And why, in both her lives, did fate insist on throwing her into the center of their clash? Bernice's heart pounded as she stepped between Alexavier and Arios, forcing the tension in the air to break. She asked the Duke to leave, her tone steady though her unease was clear. His pride flared, but without a word he stormed out, leaving Bernice to face Arios. She demanded to know why he had provoked Alexavier, but the boy's answer unsettled her. He claimed her racing heart around the Duke was not desire but distress, that his presence suffocated her. She dismissed him with firmness, though his words lingered, and soon after Vix entered, quiet, obedient, a shadow of comfort in the lonely room. That night Bernice dreamed of Alexavier as he had never been, gentle, boyish, begging her to call him by name. The dream left her shaken, her chest aching when morning revealed only the cold Duke at breakfast. When she burned her tongue on hot tea, Alexavier's alarmed reaction confused her even more. He demanded to see the wound, his touch lingering against her lips, stirring her heart and shame in equal measure. Yet as soon as it was over, he pulled away, as if recoiling from his own hand. Bernice's thoughts spiraled. Why care for her at all if he only regretted it? Restless, she wandered barefoot through the mansion, catching sight of knights training, her soul yearning for the sword. Vix rushed after her with shoes and concern, but before Bernice could answer, Alexavier appeared. When she defied his attempt to carry her back, her words cut deep, and though he set her down, broken glass tore her feet. She turned to Arios for healing, but the boy's holy light seared her body with unbearable pain until Alexavier stormed in, commanding him to stop. Pale and shaking, Bernice pushed the Duke away, demanding to know why he cared. His only reply was cold duty, that her safety was nothing but responsibility. Her heart hardened, though inside it ached. The next day, the high priest arrived, claiming Bernice belonged to the temple. Rage consumed her, and before anyone could stop her, her sword pressed against his throat. The priests cried out, but she silenced them with icy scorn, calling their god nothing more than lunar and dismissing his will entirely. When Alexavier arrived, she yielded the matter to him, but the fury in her blood did not abate. Later, Arios revealed that their bond was absolute, her command alone could control him. The weight of this truth unsettled her, even as she masked it before Alexavier. She admitted the priest had demanded her return to the temple, and declared her refusal. She was the Duchess of Duklia, not the temple's pawn. To bury her unrest, she took over the duchy's neglected accounts, drowning herself in endless stacks of records. Vix tried to coax her to rest, but Bernice pressed on until Alexavier interrupted. His attempt to treat her like a wife only deepened her scorn. She told him plainly they were not husband and wife but employer and employee. His temper rose, but he masked it by ordering Vix reassigned, leaving Bernice with a hollow suspicion that he cared for the maid. That night her chest tightened with unspoken jealousy, and in the days that followed, her mind betrayed her with visions of Alex Xavier's hands and voice belonging not to her but to Vix. The torment left her trembling, hiding tears in silence, while the storm of her own doubts threatened to consume her whole. Bernice's breaths came ragged, panic clawing at her chest until Arios's voice cut through, grounding her with the warmth of his hands. He explained their blood-bound contract, how her pain was his own and her command absolute. His eyes burned with fury as he asked if Alex had hurt her, but Bernice denied it and instead begged him for one promise. When her 1 year of marriage ended, he must help her escape. He bowed in obedience, swearing to do anything she asked, before vanishing. But peace was short-lived. Grant soon appeared with news of the duchy's grim state, winter unprepared, records missing, servants neglected for years. Bernice's anger grew as she discovered the maid's threadbare uniforms, unchanged for 5 winters, and stormed to Alex's study with proof of the corruption. He reacted with chilling command, summoning the entire household as her heart quaked at his sudden authority. That night, shadows brought greater danger. An assassin's mocking voice echoed in the darkness, blade slashing toward her unseen. Training under Sir Xylan surged back to her, the lessons of fighting blind, of listening to footsteps and cutting through hesitation. Steel rang in the silent halls as not 1 but 3 attackers pressed upon her, their blades a storm meant to end her life before dawn. But Bernice refused to fall. Her counterstrikes left bodies bleeding at her feet, her own voice cold as she demanded the survivor speak. Her name slipped free in defiance, Bernice Belial Alex Xavier Agnes, before the lights flared and reality returned, blood staining the mansion floors. She ordered Grant to secure the assassin, only to meet Alex's unreadable gaze. Her fury sharpened to accusation. Was this emptiness of guards and staff his plot to kill her? Alex denied it, swearing he had married her only to fulfill his promise to her father, but his words fell flat against the suspicion burning in her. When Grant revealed the assassin had killed himself, Alex's desperation broke through. What if she had died? What would he have done? Bernice silenced him coldly, declaring she alone would decide the mansion's fate. When pressed, she cut him down further, insisting theirs was nothing more than an employer's contract. Yet even as she steeled herself, questions gnawed. Why had Arios not appeared to shield her? Was some divine hand restraining him? She summoned the staff and stripped their excuses bare, revealing they had been lured away by a hooded stranger on the night of the attack. Enemies lurked in every shadow, yet whether they targeted her, or Alex, remained unclear. When Alex confronted her with pleas to believe him, she dismissed him, vowing she would leave after a year and free him to find his true duchess. But his sudden shout reverberated through the hall, raw and unyielding. You are my duchess. The claim shook her even as mistrust weighed heavier than hope. By morning, new doubts surfaced. Grant admitted he had fled to protect his family from whatever darkness stalked the mansion. Left alone, Bernice's mind swirled with Alex's words, uncertain if his claim had been truth or merely heat of the moment. Exhaustion dragged her into the gods' realm once more, where mocking voices warned that more attacks would come and that this world was not hers to belong to. She rejected their decree with fierce defiance, vowing to carve her own fate and threatening vengeance should they restrain Arios again. Yet the gods' final words chilled her blood. Not all gods favored her existence. She woke trembling, demanding answers from Arios. He would not reveal divine secrets, only swore again that nothing, not even the gods, could sever his vow to protect her. But for Bernice, his assurances only deepened the shadows. Each truth uncovered seemed to birth 10 more questions, and in the silence of the mansion, she could feel unseen forces drawing ever tighter around her. Bernice could feel the chasm widening between her and Alex Xavier. His aloofness gnawed at her until even the smallest gestures twisted into doubt. She convinced herself he had been with another woman, and when the thought lodged in her heart, it poisoned every glance, every silence between them. When she finally confronted him, Alex Xavier was too stunned to defend himself. Words failed him, leaving her alone with her suspicions. It was then that Vic stepped forward. He had seen enough, her suffering, the tears she tried to hide. With a sharp tongue and sharper fists, he lashed out at Alex Xavier, striking him with all the anger he carried on her behalf. Alex Xavier did not fight back. He stood there, taking the blow, his silence heavier than any defense. The moment was broken only when Arios appeared. Unlike Vix, Arios's fury was not wild but icy and controlled. He stepped between them, his presence enough to make Alex Xavier falter. His protective stance over Bernice sent a clear warning. She was no longer without shields. Yet far from mortal eyes, another battle stirred. In the divine realm, Lunar, guardian of the moon, stood before the Moirai, who had been watching Bernice's thread of fate with unease. To them, she was an anomaly, a soul reborn when she should have been extinguished. Lunar's gaze was steady, his voice low but unyielding. He admitted what others would not. Bernice's existence disrupted the order of destiny itself. The Moirai carried his words to the Almighty, whose judgment fell cold and absolute. Bernice's life was not meant to continue, and so the decree was given. She must be erased. But the moment they tried to sever her thread, resistance flared. The hand of fate itself recoiled. Something stronger bound her soul, shielding it from the shears meant to end it. Confusion rippled through the godly court. Lunar's eyes darkened, knowing what it meant. Bernice was no longer merely a stray fragment of destiny. She was becoming something else entirely. Something even the gods could not unmake. Bernice buried herself in estate work, her quill moving tirelessly over parchment, when Grant appeared to announce the attorney's return. She ordered him to wait in the study and added that the Duke should be informed, only to learn Alexavier had gone to see the Emperor. The news unsettled her. Had he gone because of her fears the night before, or was it about his parents' unsolved murder? She forced herself back to her duties until, at last, she met the attorney in the study. He presented the revised marriage contract, but urged her to reconsider the one-year term, warning that both Ablia and Alexavier's reputation might suffer. Bernice laughed bitterly, pointing out that the people despised her already. Her departure would only bring relief. Alone again, she whispered to herself, "One more year, Duke. Then I will vanish." When Alexavier returned, she confronted him, sliding the contract across the desk. He begged her to abandon the subject, but Bernice was resolute. Calmly, she even acknowledged his supposed love for Vix and offered to ask her father to raise the girl's status. Alexavier denied it firmly, yet she pressed on, pointing to the clause about investigating his parents' deaths. Her conviction shook him. Her suggestion that the Emperor himself was complicit cut deeper than he wished to admit. Coldly, she concluded that the late Duchess, once a candidate for Empress, had been silenced by conspiracy. Alexavier warned her such words were dangerous, but Bernice only smiled. He tried to temper her defiance, reminding her of the risk of being accused of ambition toward the throne, but she met him with mocking laughter. If the Emperor was indeed the culprit, she intended to expose it. She gave Alexavier one day to decide, then he revealed that the Emperor wished to meet her. The thought made her lips curl. If the culprit came to her willingly, she would be ready. Summoning Arios, she questioned him about the Emperor, but the holy sword faltered, bound by secrecy about his creator. Before she could press further, a hateful voice thundered in her mind, her eyes turning red as though something monstrous stirred within her. Panic surged through her until another voice broke through, urging her to stand and reminding her she was not a monster. Still trembling, she collapsed into unconsciousness. When she awoke, she found herself in the godly realm, where Lunar appeared in his true form. He admitted he had not summoned her, she had entered on her own, something no mortal should be able to do. Her red eyes unsettled him, and he asked if she was a demon. She snapped back that demons did not die, forcing him into silence. Though their exchange bristled with defiance, Lunar confessed he had seen Alexavier's fear and worry, urging her to return. Mist swallowed her vision, and when it cleared, she awoke in her bed, Vix at her side. Moments later, Alexavier entered, relief and anguish in his eyes. She tried to brush off his concern, insisting on honoring the contract, but he silenced her with a hand against her lips. "Don't speak of death," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm worried because you are my wife. Because it is you." His words left her shaken, caught between doubt and a fragile warmth. But she quickly shifted the subject to their impending audience with the Emperor. Alexavier urged her to rest, but she insisted she must not appear careless. When Vix came to help her prepare, Bernice felt a pang of guilt, insisting the girl should not serve her if she was truly Alexavier's lover. Vix denied the assumption, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears, and then revealed a startling truth. She was forbidden from ever leaving the mansion, from showing herself before the royal family. To Bernice, it sounded less like service and more like imprisonment. With sudden resolve, she decided Vix would accompany her. Summoning Arios, she commanded him to alter the girl's appearance completely, so that, for the first time, Vix could step beyond the mansion walls without fear of being recognized. When the summons from the Emperor finally arrived, Bernice prepared herself with unusual care. Adjusting the final touches of her gown, she steadied her breath. Outside, Alex's voice carried through the door. "Madam, are you ready?" "Just a moment," she answered calmly. Only when his footsteps faded down the corridor did she signal to the shadows. Arios's voice was the first to break the silence. "He's left?" "Yes. We're safe." From the dim corner stepped Vix, transformed by magic. Her dress mirrored Bernice's, though her altered face revealed none of her true self. Anxiety flickered in her eyes. "Duchess, is this truly all right? What if someone recognizes me?" Bernice's tone was confident, though a touch of mischief lingered beneath. "No one will. And even if they did, it would cause no harm." With that, she pulled Vix along. Together they descended the staircase, drawing curious glances from servants who dared not question their mistress. At the carriage, Alex's eyes narrowed when he saw the unfamiliar figure. "Who is this?" "I've never seen her here." "She is a maid," Bernice replied smoothly. "I need someone with me at the palace." He studied her for a long moment before relenting. "As you wish." He mounted his horse, letting them ride ahead. The journey to the palace was thick with unease. Vix shifted nervously, but Bernice reassured her. The spell will last only a few hours. We'll be back before anyone suspects. At the palace gates, however, tension awaited. Guards barred their entry until Alex's sharp rebuke reminded them of his rank and bloodline. Bernice tried to soothe his temper, but his anger flared at the insult. This is not disrespect to me, it is to you, he said grimly. Her quiet admission, that she was seen as lesser because of her birth, cut him deeply, though he said nothing. When at last they entered the Emperor's hall, the air grew heavy with judgment. Ministers and nobles fixed their eyes on Bernice as if weighing her worth. She bowed with composure, but the Emperor's questions fell like blades. You were chosen by the temple as a holy knight, he pressed. Yet you refused. Do you not see this as failure? Calmly, Bernice held her ground. I chose to serve Ablia as Duchess. I do not believe that is sin. Her defiance unsettled the ministers, and the high priest seized the chance to accuse her. But Alex spoke firmly in her defense, declaring her role invaluable. For the first time, Bernice felt the depth of his unwavering support. The confrontation ended abruptly when the chamber doors burst open. An ominous presence swept in, and Bernice froze. At the threshold stood Vix, dangerously exposed. Panic drove Bernice to break all protocol, racing forward as whispers of disrespect rose behind her. Alex acted swiftly, concealing Vix's face with his coat and ushering both women from the hall without a word. The urgency of his actions chilled Bernice. His silence was heavier than fury, and when he finally spoke in the carriage, it was with quiet intensity. You deceived me. You used Arios's magic. Why? Do you think me unfaithful? His words struck her, and though she tried to explain, suspicion and hurt clouded his eyes. When they returned home, his anger turned upon Grant for failing to notice Vix's absence, though Bernice took the blame. In the privacy of her chambers, she cornered Alex at last, demanding the truth behind his fear. His anguish, more than his anger, told her there was something he still kept hidden. While the Duke's mansion wrestled with tension, the palace was no less unsettled. Ministers railed against the Duchess, questioning her loyalty and mocking her disregard for the Emperor. The high priest urged that she belonged in the temple, not as Duchess. Even whispers of treason were daringly voiced, accusations that Alex might shield her for his own gain. The Emperor's fury silenced them, but shadows of suspicion remained. That night, in the solitude of his private chamber, Emperor Zadocus bowed before a darker power. The voice of the supreme god lashed him mercilessly for his failures, demanding one thing above all: the Duchess must be delivered to the temple. Only then would his dynasty be blessed. Shaken and desperate, Zadocus swore to obey. When news of war with a neighboring kingdom arrived soon after, the Emperor seized the chance. The council debated whether Alex Xavier or the young crown prince should lead. Though Zadocus resisted risking his heir, whispers suggested otherwise, that perhaps the prince's failure would prove him unfit. Rage silenced such talk, but doubt had already slithered into the heart of the empire. And as Zadocus's resolve hardened, Bernice's place in Ablia, whether Duchess, Knight, or Pawn of the Divine, grew more uncertain than ever. The Duchess's chamber throbbed with unspoken anguish. Tears streaked her cheeks as she pinned Alex against the wall, her voice breaking with desperation. Tell me what you're hiding. Why is she caged when she should be free? Laughing, playing, living, why keep her locked away? Alex's calm exterior faltered, guilt etched into his features. He tried to soothe her, brushing away her tears, but his silence only deepened her pain. At last, he confessed, the girl, Vix, was no ordinary child. She was the Emperor's daughter, the first princess of the Empire, hidden away by a loyal maid of the late Empress. To reveal her now would invite danger from enemies who still lingered in the shadows. The revelation struck Bernice to her core. Her jealous suspicions dissolved into shame, and she fell to her knees, begging Alex's forgiveness. Yet he lifted her gently, insisting the fault was his for keeping such secrets. Between guilt and compassion, their bond grew stronger, tethered now by truth and shared resolve. But Bernice's mind did not rest. If the late Empress had hidden her daughter, then something darker was at play. Why would she entrust her child to Ablia rather than leave her with the Emperor's protection, she pressed. Unless the Emperor himself ordered it buried. Her words carried the sting of accusation. Alex did not deny it. I will not stop you from pursuing the truth, he told her, though he warned of the peril it would bring. Later that night, Bernice slipped from her chamber, accompanied by her spirit Arios. In the garden shadows, an assassin revealed himself, blade drawn. Their duel echoed through the quiet grounds until Alex and the guards intervened. Though Alex urged her to retreat, Bernice refused to yield, demanding the prisoner be taken alive for questioning. But Arios's temper flared. He called Alex a monster, recalling the countless lives lost under his command during years of war. The Duchess trembled at the revelation, yet when Alex admitted it was true, she did not recoil. Instead, she met his haunted gaze with compassion. I don't fear you, she whispered. Not anymore. The warmth between them deepened, but duty soon pulled her to the dungeon, where the captured assassin awaited. Shackled and raging, he accused her of killing his brother. He claimed a hooded man had shown him blood-stained clothes and a letter in his brother's hand, proof that Bernice had tortured him to death. Bernice countered fiercely. Anyone could forge such lies. Who was this man in the hood, and why pit strangers against her? The assassin offered nothing more than hatred, his grief blinding him to reason. Alex urged Bernice to step back, but his cries of vengeance haunted her even after she left the cell. That night, as she paced her chamber, a venomous voice whispered through the shadows, "Bernice Belial, stop coming in my way." She challenged it, mocking its cowardice, but the presence vanished, leaving her with more questions than answers. The unease grew worse when she returned to the dungeon and found Grant lurking near the prisoner. His excuses faltered under her sharp questions. Why had he killed the first assassin? Why lie about his whereabouts? Why meddle where he had no orders? Suspicion hardened into certainty, and Bernice ordered his arrest. Chained and protesting his innocence, Grant pleaded for mercy, but Bernice's patience was gone. She pressed for the truth, demanding to know who he served. The tense confrontation drew Alex himself into the chamber. His loyalty to his butler clashed with her certainty, and the air grew heavy with doubt. "You cannot imagine his betrayal," Bernice declared coldly. "He may be loyal to you, Duke, but he has never been loyal to me." The dungeon fell silent, the web of trust and deception tightening around them all. Shadows thickened, and though Bernice had uncovered much, the true enemy still lurked unseen, watching, waiting, and plotting her fall. Bernice stood before the Duke, the weight of suspicion and betrayal pressing heavily upon her. The confrontation with Grant still lingered, yet Alex Xavier's loyalty to his butler remained unshaken. "Do you think I am lying, Duke?" she asked, her voice edged with disbelief. His reply was firm, almost cutting. He accused her of mistrusting everyone, insisting that Grant's loyalty was beyond question. But Bernice pressed harder, demanding to know why the man had been lurking in the dungeon in the dead of night. Alex Xavier dismissed her doubts, claiming Grant's concern was for her safety. Her warning was cold. "You will regret this." Before the silence could break, Vix's voice rang out, calling her name with concern. Yet Bernice could not answer. Sorrow pressed against her ribs, choking her words. She turned and retreated to her chambers, shutting herself away. Sleep eventually claimed her, but her dreams offered no refuge. A summons echoed in her mind. "The mistress requests your presence." Guided by the voice, she entered a grand chamber and bowed before a woman of poise and authority, the former Duchess, Alex Xavier's mother. "Bernice," the woman said gravely, "it is time my son takes another wife. Years have passed with no heir. The family line must continue." The word struck like a blade. Bernice clenched her fists beneath her gown and replied with quiet dignity, "As you wish, mother." Moments later, Alex Xavier entered with a princess clinging to his arm. He was introduced to his new bride, while Bernice bowed herself out of the room, her heart splintering. When Alex Xavier later sought her, her tone was brittle as glass. "Congratulations on your future marriage, Duke." "Duchess," he called, frustration bleeding through. The voice grew sharper, louder, until it no longer belonged to him at all. Bernice's eyes flew open. Vix was shaking her, panic in her face. "You wouldn't wake up," the crown prince whispered. Bernice exhaled slowly, realization dawning. So, it was a dream again. She offered a faint smile, though the shadow of that vision clung like chains. Morning came with no clarity. Descending the grand staircase, Bernice found Alex Xavier already at the breakfast table. "Madam, did you sleep well?" he asked evenly. "Did I?" she said sharply. "Maybe." He frowned, puzzled. She set her plate down only to pick it up again. "Where are you going?" "To my room." "I don't want to sit with you." "Isn't that clear enough?" Her words struck like arrows, but she did not soften them. "I am only the acting duchess here. Even on the day I die, I will remain nothing more than that." She stormed away, anger echoing through her steps, only to hear the voice she hated most. Bernice. Dragged into the god realm, she stood before the god of fate. Her fury spilled over. "Why must I always suffer? You treat me like a pawn and still demand reverence. Why?" "Stop this childishness," the god thundered. But her defiance only grew. "If you could erase me, you already would have. That's why I returned to my past, because you can't. And you fear me for it." Before the god could respond, Morai appeared, his authority silencing the hall. "And you, what are you doing here?" he demanded. Bernice met his gaze coldly. "Ask him." "He dragged me here." Her words provoked scorn. "Is this how you address gods?" "To humans, you may be divine," she replied bitterly. "But to me, you are monsters. You hunt me. Why should I bow?" Her words struck like iron. And then the god realm vanished. Bernice found herself back in her room, gasping. Duchess, where did your mind wander? I've been calling you for so long. It was Vix again. The Duke asked me to check on you, the girl explained. Tell him not to bother. I'm alive. If I'm going to die, I'll inform him myself, Bernice said dryly. When Vix left, Bernice cloaked herself and slipped into the daylight. The mansion's security was laughably weak. Guards absent, one soldier asleep at the gate. With ease, she walked free. But outside, she realized she didn't know the roads. She wandered until a carriage appeared and offered a coin for passage. Inside, a woman studied her. You're new here, aren't you? Yes. Then you've made a mistake. Ablia is not as the royals claim. People starve. Families kill for bread. The Duke spent years at war, and those left behind in the mansion ignore us. When we beg for help, we're thrown out. Bernice's heart clenched. So this is why they don't acknowledge me. The woman's final words lingered. Leave, before you die of hunger too. When Bernice stepped out, the city revealed its truth. Ruined shops, empty shelves, families in rags. A hollowed kingdom, abandoned by its rulers. How could he not see, she whispered. Arios. The spirit appeared. Has this place always been like this? No, master. When the former Duke and Duchess lived, this land prospered. But after their deaths, and after the Emperor's ascension, everything collapsed. Bernice's fists clenched. The truth of Ablia was darker than she had ever imagined. As she walked the streets, a desperate woman lunged at her, clawing at her clothes. Give me your dress. Your money. I'll buy food for a year. Bernice held her steady. You don't have to do this. I'll give you food. Come with me. She led the woman to a shop, but the waiter sneered. You can't bring that beggar inside. Bernice's fury ignited. Beggar? Then Ablia is full of beggars. Shame on you. Turning away, she brought the woman back to the mansion, this time openly through the front gates. Alex came rushing, relief in his voice. Madam. Where were you? I searched everywhere. Why? Didn't anyone tell you I left through the main entrance? That's impossible, Grant interrupted quickly. The guards never left their posts. Someone must have helped you escape. Bernice cut him coldly. I left in plain sight. If your guards didn't notice, they are incompetent. But when she tried to enter with the woman, the soldiers blocked her path. You can't bring that beggar inside. That word again. Her voice cracked like a whip. I'm sick of hearing it. These people are your citizens, not vermin. How dare you strip them of humanity? Alex tried to calm her, pleading. But Bernice no longer wavered. Her voice rang clear and resolute. If no one else will act, then I will. Change begins with me. That night, in the dim chamber, Alex stood before her, confusion etched across his face. What do you mean you'll take responsibility for Ablia? Bernice faced him squarely, his men's swords once again grazing her throat. I was brought here as Duchess, and I will fulfill that duty. But whether you are fit to be Duke, I am no longer certain. Her laugh was bitter. Perhaps that was your purpose in marrying me, to strip me of worth. If so, remember this. You will regret it. She stepped forward, ignoring the sting of blood. Arios tugged at her, begging her to stop, but she pressed on. Drop your swords, she ordered coldly. When hesitation lingered, she shouted, I said drop them. The blades lowered. Remember your place. You are my servants. Do not raise steel against me again. She turned to Grant. Bring the ledgers to my room. That is all. When I give an order, the only answer is, yes, Duchess. With the trembling woman at her side, she withdrew. Vix appeared in the hall, alarm flooding her eyes at the sight of blood. Duchess, you're injured. It's nothing. Just bring food and clean clothes. In her chamber, the frightened woman accused her of trickery. You lied. There is no food, you'll make me a slave. Bernice knelt beside her. No one will harm you. Trust me. The food will come. Only after calming her did Bernice retreat into the washroom. There, staring at her reflection, she saw the blood at her throat and felt the ghost of another blade, ancient and familiar though she had no memory of it. Bernice. The voice returned, soft yet commanding. Many will oppose you. Obstacles will rise. But do not waver, you are on the right path. Who are you? She whispered. You will know in time. But remember this, do not stop. Follow your heart. The voice faded, leaving her staring at her reflection, shaken. She had once believed her struggle would last only a year. But now she realized the road ahead stretched far longer, heavier, and far more complex than she had ever imagined. A knock disturbed the silence of Bernice's chamber. Vix entered with food and clean clothes, only to find a ragged woman clutching at the tray like a starving wolf, claiming it all for herself. Confused, Vix asked who she was, and Bernice calmly explained she had taken the woman in after finding her abandoned, starving, and rejected from every inn. If seeing one person in such a state affects me so much, what will I feel when I see thousands? Bernice said firmly. Vix's eyes widened at the mention of crowds, but Bernice's resolve was unshaken. Their exchange was interrupted by Grant, who arrived with the ledgers she had requested. When he suggested she should consult Alex before interfering, Bernice's laugh was sharp. How can you ask me to seek his opinion now, when he ignored these records for years? Shamed, Grant handed over the books and left. Bernice ordered Vix to see the woman properly tended to, then summoned Arios to help scour the ledgers. The account seemed flawless. Millions allocated, signatures neatly recorded, yet outside, Ablia starved. The records are too perfect, Arios noted. The money is gone, but the people have nothing. Bernice snapped the ledger shut. Exactly. I will uncover where it went. She summoned the household staff and demanded they state their wages aloud. Nervous whispers rippled, until one maid admitted she received only 10 silver coins a month. Bernice's eyes darkened. According to the books, each servant was allotted 5 gold coins, with clothing for festivals. She vowed to restore what was theirs. Grant, flustered, accused her of creating unrest, then fled to complain to the Duke. Soon after, Bernice was summoned to Alex's study. He accused her of falsely charging Grant, his voice sharp with anger, but she stood her ground. I have accused no one. I asked the workers their wages, and their truth differs from the records you trust so blindly. Do you wish me to bring them here to speak for themselves? She ordered the staff summoned, and before Alex's eyes, they all confirmed what she had uncovered. Grant faltered, then fell to his knees in desperation, but Bernice's command was iron. He was to be thrown into the dungeon. Alex tried to intervene, but Bernice warned him that if he interfered again, she would return to her family and abandon Ablia altogether. His silence was her answer, and Grant was dragged away. In the dungeon, Grant's mask crumbled. He admitted to orchestrating the assassination attempt against Bernice, sneering that her survival meant nothing, because death would find her anyway. When she demanded to know who was behind it, he laughed in madness, saying only that her very existence was her doom. Alex arrived, furious at how Bernice treated Grant, but Grant twisted the moment further, claiming Bernice was unfit as Duchess and that Alex should have married the woman chosen by the former Duchess. The mention jolted Bernice. Echoes of her dreams of a veiled woman and whispered disapproval returned to her mind. Pressing Alex, she demanded the truth. In his study, Alex finally broke. With anguish, he admitted what she dreaded, that he had once been meant to marry the first princess of the empire. Bernice's heart cracked beneath the weight of his confession. She steadied herself and apologized, then left him, refusing to hear more. In the corridor, Arios appeared, warning her not to go to the emperor alone. She refused to yield. Whatever awaits, I will face it. The next day, she set out for the palace. Alex did not see her off, and Arios' anxious gaze was the last comfort she carried. Along the way, the knights reported that the road was impassable until morning. Suspicion gnawed at Bernice, but she agreed to take shelter in a lonely manor house offered by an elderly caretaker. At first the mansion seemed quiet but safe, yet as hours passed, no food came, and silence thickened in the halls. Uneasy, Bernice stepped into the corridor, her voice echoing unanswered as she called for the caretaker, for her guards, for anyone. Then, chilling words sliced through the darkness. The holy sword will not save you. He was never meant to protect you. Know your place, foolish human. The disembodied voice mocked her, claiming she had stolen blessings and prophecies that rightfully belonged to another. Bernice protested her innocence, but the voice roared that her very existence was the threat. Shadows warped on the walls as dread clawed at her chest. She demanded to know who the speaker was, but only cryptic words answered her. One day she would learn the truth of who she was, and when that day came, she would wish she had never been born. The silence that followed was heavier than the words themselves, pressing in as Bernice stood alone in the vast, haunted mansion, her heart racing and her spirit trembling. In the ethereal realm of the supreme god, darkness churned in violent clouds, swirling around the golden throne. From the shadows, only a pair of lips emerged, commanding and furious. At the figure's side appeared Arios, the holy sword, his expression resolute as he knelt before the master who had forged him. I must beg forgiveness for what I am about to say, he began, steady but unyielding. Release my master. The divine presence thundered, his voice steeped in rage. Arios, do not forget who I am. I am your lord, not her. I gave you life, forged you from the powers of gods themselves. And yet you betray me to serve a mere mortal woman? Arios did not lower his eyes. It is not betrayal. She and I are bound by blood, a connection you never severed. If you wish, then cut it now, I will not resist. But if you cannot, then you must accept that I stand with her. The supreme god's wrath trembled through the realm, his hand gripping the throne until the heavens quaked. I made you to protect humanity, not to devote yourself to one woman. But Ario's reply was unwavering. My lord, I remember why I was created. Yet humanity still suffers while you hoard power. I was forged as proof of your supremacy, but your ambition has blinded you. If you wish to erase me, do so, but you will need the consent of the gods whose power resides within me. Can you persuade them? If not, then I remain, and I choose her. The gods seethed but struck no blow. With a sweep of his hand, the shadows parted, revealing the golden palace that shimmered with light. He appeared once more in his true form, long black hair spilling like ink, eyes crimson with fury. She should not have returned, he muttered, pacing the chamber. I ended her life. I decreed her death. How dare she defy me? I am the arbiter of life and death. But then a voice intruded, mocking, haunting, familiar. Marcus Fulcinius Eumenius. The supreme god froze. Who dares? Show yourself. Laughter echoed in reply, soft yet merciless. Still so blind, Marcus? Recognition tore through him. Aurelia, he whispered. Yes, Marcus, the voice answered, cool and unyielding. You have not forgotten. I remain in your heart even now. But he raged in denial. No. She is not you. She will never be you. You were mine alone. The voice sharpened, shifting into the angelic likeness of Aurelia, yet her visage mirrored Bernice's face, cruel and radiant. Do you still not see? I was never yours. The real Aurelia would draw her sword against you, even if it meant her death. The golden hall trembled as Marcus wavered between truth and illusion, torn by a love twisted into obsession. His denial dragged him into memory. Shadows dissolved into blinding light, and he was once again a boy running through celestial fields. His mother, the divine matron, struggled to keep pace, her breath heavy. Marcus, slow down, she called gently. He turned with youthful disdain. Divine Mother, are you not the embodiment of strength? Show me your power. Her voice was calm. My strength is not for myself. It exists only for humanity. Never for my own gain. The boy's eyes shone. Then promise, you will make me supreme god. Tenderly, she smiled. You are destined for greatness, my son. But greatness is not won by power alone. The vision shattered. The heavens burned, gods lay fallen, and Marcus stood grown, his blade dripping red as he faced his mother upon her throne. You betrayed me, he spat. You chose her as heir, not me. Why? Grief dimmed her eyes. It was not I who chose, Marcus. The prophecy named her. You were not chosen because the heavens foresaw what I did not, the darkness in you. His lips curled into cruelty. And yet you promised never to wield your power for yourself. You will not fight me, even now? She remained silent. Then die, he whispered, and his blade severed her head. Blood stained the divine throne. An oracle's voice thundered across the ruin. Marcus Fulcinius Eumenius shall never be supreme. The true heir shall be reborn among mortals, and he shall be banished as traitor. Marcus laughed bitterly. Banished? I am the god of manipulation. The gods will kneel. And one by one, bound by his power, they did. His reign of betrayal began in blood. In the mortal realm, the Duchess endured a torment of her own. Night after night, the abyss clawed at her, and her cries echoed unanswered. Show yourself. Who are you? Why torment me? From the void came howls, monstrous and mournful, until a figure emerged, grotesque, fanged, its malice suffocating. She fled in terror, the endless corridor stretching before her, the beast pursuing relentlessly. Arios. Help me, she cried, but her guardian never came. Tears streamed as she screamed his name into the darkness. The nightmare forest closed around her, trees towering like sentinels. She collapsed behind a trunk, realizing the beast hunted by sound. Holding her breath, she moved silently until dawn's light pierced the canopy. Relief flickered, until night's voices called her name. They found her trembling and bewildered. Where were you? She demanded, tears in her eyes. I screamed all night, and none of you came. But their bafflement revealed they had heard nothing. Escorted back to the palace, the Duchess carried her fear like a shroud. She demanded audience once more, standing before the Emperor with unshaken resolve. Your Majesty, she said, her voice ringing clear, are you aware of Ablia's true state? The Emperor faltered, insisting Ablia thrived, but she met his gaze steadily. No. Ablia is suffering. Its people starve and its lands crumble. What reason would I have to lie? Her words unsettled the court, murmurs rising as doubt crept through the hall. Ministers objected, but others wavered. And when she bowed to depart, the Emperor stayed her. You will not return to the duchy tonight, he said with a thin smile. Later, alone in her chambers, the haunting voice returned, mocking her as palace staff twisted into grotesque smiles, seizing her limbs. She fought free, only to meet a sympathetic guard who confessed to whispers of shadows in the palace. Then came Lucius, a minister with grave warning. There is a faction seeking to discredit you, Duchess. They covet your duchy. But more than politics, this palace is haunted by an ancient darkness. It has endured for generations. He led her to a hidden chamber where loyal advisors gathered in secrecy. Their faces bore determination, and for the first time, she realized she was not alone. The knight's heavy footsteps echoed through the dark forest as he pressed on, desperately searching for Duchess Bernice Baliol Agnes. Sweat slid down his face, his armor weighed heavy on his shoulders, and every rustle in the undergrowth made his heart pound harder. The forest felt alive, its shadows closing in, whispering that something sinister was watching him. His voice broke the silence as he called out into the gloom. Duchess, are you here? Please, answer me. But only the croaks of hidden creatures responded. Again he shouted, his tone rising with fear, but no reply came, only the oppressive silence pressing back against him. Deeper and deeper he pushed into the darkness, unwilling to surrender. Then, footsteps. Someone was moving ahead of him, quick, uneven. His hope surged. He leapt from his horse and ran forward, calling her name, reaching for the fleeting figure ahead. Duchess. Stop, it's me. Yet the woman bolted, faster now, forcing him into a desperate chase until he finally caught her and pulled away the curtain covering her face. His heart sank. It was not Bernice. You are not the Duchess, he demanded, confusion and anger warring in his voice. The stranger, a sharp-tongued woman, smirked as though amused by his desperation. When did I ever say I was the Duchess? She snapped back, provoking his fury. In blind anger he pinned her to a tree, his hand at her throat, his voice trembling with rage as he threatened to tear her tongue out if she mocked him again. She choked, trembling, until he finally released her. Coughing violently, she collapsed to her knees while he turned away, disgusted by the wasted time. From the shadows a man approached her, tossing a pouch of silver at her feet. Well done, Sylvia. I knew you would succeed. She glared at him, voice hoarse from strangulation. If I had known this job would nearly kill me, I would never have agreed. But he silenced her with a cruel grip, his fingers digging into her cheek until it bled. Don't forget your place. You are nothing but His Majesty's plaything. Do as you're told or die. Shaken, Sylvia fled the forest, while the man's dark chuckle lingered long after she was gone. Far away, Duke Alexavier Agnes walked through the town streets cloaked in a dark hood, his eyes scanning every passerby with desperate hope. Each face brought a sting of disappointment. Then, a little girl approached with a bundle of yellow flowers, smiling sweetly. My lord, would you like some flowers? They're fresh from the fields. He shook his head brusquely, but she persisted. If not for you, then take them for your wife. Yellow suits her, like the sun. His steps faltered. The word wife pierced his heart. Slowly he turned back, purchased every flower, and clutched them as though holding on to Bernice herself. Tears blurred his sight as he whispered into the petals, Wife, where are you? In his mind, he saw her, smiling, twirling in a yellow dress, calling him to dance. Alex, come forward. Dance with me, it's fun. He reached for her phantom form, but the illusion dissolved into grief. Determined, he questioned townsfolk, begging them to recall if they had seen her. But all shook their heads. The shopkeeper explained that on those very days the Emperor had ordered a sudden curfew, locking every soul indoors. Alexavier's mind reeled. A curfew? Without reason? No monster attacks, no threats, nothing to justify it. Fury burned in him as he rode back to the palace. Before the Emperor and court, he cast aside all restraint. Where is my wife? He thundered, voice echoing through the chamber. Your Majesty, you told me she may be sightseeing, but you yourself imposed a curfew. Are you mocking me? Do you take us all for fools? Gasps rippled through the ministers. The Emperor feigned ignorance, claiming no such order, but Alexavier pressed harder, his hand tightening on his sword hilt. Do not lie to me. If this was the work of your priest, it is still on your shoulders, for I warned you of the danger he posed to my wife, and you ignored me. Who bears the blame now? The missing Duchess, or the Emperor who disregarded my pleas? His shout shook the hall, leaving courtiers pale and silent. Even the Crown Prince stepped forward, urging calm, but Alexavier would not relent. You failed to find the criminals who slaughtered my parents, and now my wife vanishes. I will not let this be another empty promise. Bring her back, no matter what. Without waiting for reply, he stormed out, determination blazing. His path led him to the Holy Temple, long hungry to claim Bernice as their knight. His horse's hooves struck the stone hard as he dismounted at the gates. Guards barred his path, warning of his malice, but he raised his voice. Yes, I carry malice. And it is for you. Release the way, or I will cut it myself. The guards tensed, but the high priest himself emerged, hands raised to calm the storm. Duke, this is holy ground. What madness drives you to profane it with blood? But Alex Xavier's grief had hardened into fury. Holy? This place reeks of corruption. If you did not take her, then prove it, return my wife. Otherwise I swear, no one leaves this temple alive. His sword gleamed in the dim light, and the trembling priests cried out for mercy. Only then did he lower his blade, exhaustion seeping into his bones. He had not eaten nor rested in 3 days, surviving only on rage and grief. That was when his knights approached, delivering their report. Bernice was still unfound, but suspicion pointed to one of the royal knights, a woman who had acted strangely during interrogation, refusing to speak, her fingers trembling as she avoided every question. Alex Xavier's weary eyes lit with grim determination. Take me to her. If she knows something, I will make her speak. The knight led him to the palace grounds, where the woman stood rigidly on patrol. When confronted, she stammered denials, eyes downcast, but her silence betrayed her. Alex Xavier's fists clenched at his sides as he stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You were there the night she vanished. Look me in the eye and tell me you know nothing. His heart pounded as he waited, desperate for the truth, his entire world balanced on the trembling lips of the frightened knight. The courtyard simmered with unease as Duke Alex Xavier Agnes's sharp voice cut through the night, his gaze fixed on a trembling knight who refused to meet his eyes. Her silence only deepened his suspicion, and though she stammered out a denial, his instincts told him otherwise. He released her with a cold command, then slipped into the shadows to follow. Moonlight guided him to a hidden corner where she met Lucius, cloaked and whispering in hushed tones. Their words betrayed them, fear, secrecy, mention of the Duchess. Alex Xavier stepped into the light, sword drawn, demanding answers. Panic scattered them, the knight fled while Lucius barred his path. Steel clashed, blood spilled, and the fleeing woman was struck down by Lucius's thrown blade. Yet when Alex Xavier cried out, the body and its blood vanished as if they had never been. Surrounded by skeptical knights, Alex Xavier's fury boiled into desperation. Lucius, smirking, denied everything, leaving the Duke in chains, branded mad, while whispers of his wife's disappearance spread like wildfire. Imprisoned, Alex Xavier's grief gnawed at him until word came that the Emperor himself summoned him. Brought before Zadicus and Crown Prince Maximus, Alex Xavier confronted them with bitter accusations, failures of justice, conspiracies that erased truth, his wife lost while traitors walked free. His words drew scorn from the prince and weary dismissal from the Emperor, but even as they ordered him to rest, Alex Xavier heard a voice colder than death call his name. The sound rattled him, unseen and unexplained. Guards led him away, muttering of madness, while in the shadows of the chamber, Zadicus was left alone with the suffocating presence of Marcus, the supreme god, who warned him to silence his son before curiosity unearthed forbidden truths. Trembling, the Emperor submitted. But Maximus was not so easily swayed. Leaving his father, he sought answers himself. He questioned the knights, visited the courtyard, and saw with his own eyes the damp stones scrubbed clean where Alex Xavier had sworn blood had fallen. The cover-up was undeniable. He confronted Lucius directly, stripping him of excuses until the knight faltered. Before his men, Maximus declared him guilty of murder and deceit, ordering him bound. As Lucius was dragged to the old prison, his composure unraveled, babbling that the Duchess had been caged in the final cell. Yet when they reached it, there was nothing but dust and cobwebs. Terror gripped Lucius, whispering that she could not have escaped or the Emperor himself would end him. The words only deepened Maximus's suspicion that far darker powers moved beneath the Empire's surface. In the prison's gloom, Maximus pressed Lucius, demanding truth. Shackled and cornered, the knight lashed back with venomous whispers, hinting that the prince's own crown was built upon lies, that another heir, a child of the late Empress, had been erased for his sake. Rage silenced him, but before Maximus could force more, the Emperor's attendant arrived, unlocking Lucius's chains with the Emperor's authority. Powerless to defy the command, Maximus ceded as the man was freed. His fury carried him to the moonlit gardens, where he accused his father of protecting traitors and covering murder with silence. Zadicus dismissed his words, but before their argument could boil over, a scream split the night. Racing back, Maximus found the prison drenched in blood. Lucius writhed on the floor, stabbed again and again, while the Emperor's attendant stood over him, her hands steady, her gown soaked crimson. She dropped the knife and surrendered with eerie calm, demanding her own execution as though it were her destiny. Maximus bound her himself, refusing to grant her death, certain she was covering for another. He dragged her into hiding as the knight stormed the chamber to erase the scene once more, their silence betraying complicity. When they were alone, Maximus forced the woman to face him. Her mask of indifference cracked under his piercing words, her clenched jaw and trembling hands betrayed fear. She warned him that by protecting her, he was making an enemy far greater than herself. But he refused to release her, pulling her into his private chambers and locking the door. Her name spilled from her lips at last, Sylvia, and though she spat defiance, he met it with sharp control, declaring she would remain under his hand until the truth was laid bare. The tension between them burned as she fought against him, even pressing her hands to his throat, daring to kill. He held her gaze with steady calm, whispering that perhaps prison would suit her better. Their struggle drew them close, bodies pressed in a charged defiance neither could deny. His voice dropped into a growl, dark with challenge. "Tell me, Sylvia, doesn't this position feel strange?" Sylvia's smirk cut through the chamber's silence. "I never knew the Crown Prince was such a pervert." Maximus met her taunt with calm defiance. "How am I a pervert when you climbed onto me like a starving wolf?" Their words sparked and fizzled, the air between them thick with unspoken tension, until Sylvia turned away and closed her eyes, ending the exchange on her own terms. Maximus, left restless, could not help but wonder what fate had placed this woman in his path. The night was broken by a sharp rattle at his door. Hand on his blade, he demanded the intruder reveal himself. The head knight stepped forward, grim-faced. "Your Highness, the witness is dead. We followed your orders to hide it, but soon decay will betray us." Maximus's jaw tightened. "This palace isn't safe. Speak no more of it here." Sylvia, feigning sleep, heard everything. "If the witness is gone, I'll be next. The Emperor will silence me too." Quietly, she slipped to the window and leapt into the night. Her body slammed against earth and stone, blood spilling down her legs, but she forced herself into the forest's shadows until even the Black Wrath Guard lost her trail. When he returned, Maximus's fury erupted. "She escaped. You let her leap from the window like a fool?" But his anger was cut short as the Emperor himself appeared. "Maximus. Enough of this. Stop meddling. I will strip your title if I must." The prince's resolve hardened. "So it's true. You killed Lucius, silenced the knights, and imprisoned the Duchess. If you are my enemy, then I will no longer see you as my father. If there is a first heir to this empire, then let them step into the light." Their clash left Maximus shaken but unbroken. Questions tormented him, about his mother, the Duchess, and the true heir of the throne. He sought the Empress, demanding answers. She deflected with titles, but when her mask cracked beneath his suspicions, fear glimmered in her eyes. That moment was enough. Maximus fled, his doubts now poison. He found Alexavier drowning in drink, raging at shadows. Maximus dragged him up, confessing he believed him at last. "We must leave. Only outside the palace will we find her." Half conscious, the Duke stumbled beside him as they fled into the night. Blood on the forest path betrayed Sylvia's desperate flight, but she was gone. By dawn, they rode through villages broken by unlawful taxes, proof of the corruption the Duchess had tried to expose. Maximus gave the peasants his own badge for protection, while Alexavier faltered between disbelief and shame. "Your wife was braver than you," Maximus said bitterly. "She carried the courage you lost." Their search led them deeper into the forest, toward the hidden tribal lands. Sylvia, meanwhile, dragged her battered body into a secret cave, her cries for her father echoing off stone. Bloodied and broken, she emerged at last into the arms of her attendants, demanding not medicine but her father himself. Rage burned through her exhaustion. "I was sent as a sacrifice. I will not forgive it." The palace reeled at her return. Doctors fought to keep her alive, whispering that sharpened wood had pierced her flesh. When word spread of the concubine's pregnancy, the court turned restless with speculation. The concubine wept crocodile tears for the princess, but in private, her mask slipped. She ordered her maid to vanish, furious that Sylvia still lived. When the ruler returned at last, Sylvia confronted him before the court. "Was I sent as a daughter, or as a goat for slaughter?" His silence condemned him, and when pressed, he spat the truth: "A woman can never sit on the throne." The words cracked the empire open. The hall erupted in outrage, courtiers demanding answers, the queen snapping at Sylvia to mind her tongue. But the princess would not bow. Her fury scorched all, her father, her mother, even the concubine he now favored. She mocked him with the truth he could not hide: the concubine carried a child, declared by astrologers to be a son. And when guards burst in with news of intruders near the sacred cave, Sylvia demanded to see them herself. Dragged into the hall, shackled but unbroken, stood Crown Prince Maximus and Duke Alexavier. Sylvia's composure cracked. "You." Her fury flared, but she claimed them as her guests and led them into seclusion. Alone, she pressed her hand to Maximus's throat, hissing, "Do you know what you've done? You broke the pact. You exposed this land." Unmoved, he pressed her harder. "I don't care about the pact. Tell me who ordered the knight's death. Name him." She faltered, caught between rage and something far more dangerous when his closeness threatened to unravel her. Yet at last, her voice broke free. "It was the Emperor. Your father himself." The revelation crashed over them. Alexavier staggered in disbelief, Maximus's eyes darkened with certainty, and Sylvia, pale, trembling, yet unyielding, pushed them toward the door. "Now that you know, leave." If anyone else learns you're here, none of us will survive. But before they could move, a voice cut through the chamber. Princess. What are you doing here? The ruler's sudden arrival froze Sylvia where she stood. She forced a strained smile, greeting him quickly, though his sharp gaze lingered on Maximus and Alexavier. Pressed to explain, she stammered out a flimsy excuse, but the ruler's suspicion remained. Maximus, ever reckless, nearly revealed his identity, forcing Sylvia to stamp her heel into his foot in warning. She whispered furiously that his life would be forfeit if anyone learned who he was. Yet before they could leave, a wall of steel met them, guards with arrows drawn, led by Feng Mei. The concubine's venom dripped as she accused Sylvia of consorting with the enemy and betraying tribal secrets. The guards seized Maximus and Alexavier despite Sylvia's protest, chaining them in the dungeon. Her father arrived soon after, his wrath merciless. Denouncing her as unfit heir, he lashed Maximus with a whip until his blood stained the floor. In his fury, he revealed a chilling truth. The Emperor himself had ordered assassins to kill the North Duchess, Bernice, time and again. Alexavier's shock deepened, only to collapse into something darker. Pain twisted his mind until his eyes turned black, his words warped with blind devotion to the Emperor. Maximus pleaded for Sylvia to save him, but when Alexavier left with her help, his empty gaze promised only confusion and betrayal. Back in the palace, chaos erupted when Maximus's disappearance reached the Emperor. The shadow of the Almighty God denied involvement yet warned that the prince's search for the Duchess endangered everything. When word arrived that Maximus was in tribal hands and Sylvia missing, the Emperor's ministers whispered of a forgotten heir, the child of the late Empress. Memories resurfaced of a girl born amid blood and cruelty, commanded to be silenced at birth. At the same time, Alexavier returned with a hollow calm, guiding knights into a hidden passage that led straight to the tribal stronghold. There, his smirk betrayed them. He had already bartered Sylvia's trust and allegiance to the enemy. Sylvia's fury scorched him when she learned of his betrayal. She accused him of treachery and even complicity in Bernice's fate, her words forcing him to his knees in sudden torment. Yet before she could press further, guards tore her away. The ruler declared Maximus a hostage until the Emperor came in person, then revealed the prince's torment through Water's cruel vision. As rage rippled through the knights, Alexavier broke into slaughter, cutting down warriors and innocents alike until his sword itself abandoned him, condemning him as unworthy. Memories of his cruelty, his failures, and Bernice's lost love crushed him to the ground. He wept her name into the blood-soaked earth, then rose hollow but determined to reclaim Maximus alone. The ruler only sneered, naming him a monster who could never return to the light. Desperate, Alexavier surrendered himself to the ruler, begging only for Maximus's release. He claimed loyalty to the tribal cause, swearing to betray the emperor he once served. Though doubtful, the ruler relented, allowing him to free the crown prince. Yet Maximus recoiled from him, refusing his hand. His voice, weak but unyielding, severed their bond of friendship forever. Sylvia appeared then, taking the prince into her arms, her gaze colder than any blade. She vowed to escort Maximus back herself, leaving Alexavier to walk behind in shame. Her final words branded him a traitor whose reckoning would one day come. Their return to the empire was met with cries of relief, but the emperor's joy was shadowed by fear. He muttered of hidden truths, of the Duchess still living, of Bernice concealed for years. When the Empress pressed him, he silenced her in fury. Alone, he confessed his failure to the Almighty God, who condemned him as unfit to rule. In the darkness, Marcus Fulcinius Eumenius revealed himself as the so-called god, mocking Bernice as she hung trapped in an enchanted prison. He raged that she was not the woman he loved, only to be shaken when prophecy echoed in his mind. He was no chosen one, only a usurper doomed to be cast down. Meanwhile, Sylvia herself was cast into confinement upon her return. Guards shoved her into a cell with mocking words, but within its shifting walls she heard a voice, Bernice. The Duchess was alive, bound within the Centurion enigma, a prison of layered circles that sealed her mana and cut her from the moon god. To free her was near impossible, yet Sylvia refused to yield. Sitting before the glowing weave, she summoned a radiant shield that deflected even the god's lightning and fire. When her attempt to pierce the circle flung her back in pain, she rose again, glaring at the figure who finally revealed himself. Marcus, the self-proclaimed Almighty God, demanded to know what she was, how she could wield knowledge no one in this age should possess. Sylvia clenched her fists, her voice steady with defiance. I am what my family made me, she declared. And I will not stop until she is free. Princess Sylvia ignored the so-called supreme god, unsure whether what she saw was real or merely illusion. The thought of Duchess Bernice being trapped in such a sinister aura unsettled her, and she struggled to understand how to free her. Memories of her childhood returned, her grandfather's words that she was born with a dangerous, rare core, not cultivated but innate, and that it must be hidden or it would bring calamity. The memory dissolved as the god's strikes failed to pierce her shield, until a golden light struck her chest and pain made her scream. Visions surged, glimpses of another life, divine halls, attendants calling her princess, a past that was not her own. Confused, she collapsed, whispering for her brother not to kill her before fainting. The god staggered as voices accused him of being no god at all but Marcus Fulcinius Eumenius, the murderer who destroyed the godly realm. Shaken, he fled, leaving Sylvia and Bernice imprisoned in that strange space. Elsewhere, Crown Prince Maximus demanded Sylvia be brought to him, but attendants reminded him of the emperor's prohibition. The emperor himself arrived, declaring the tribal empire undeserving of existence and summoning his council. In fury, he ordered the empire erased, dismissing ministers who reminded him the princess had saved the crown prince. When one dared to suggest she was imprisoned under his command, he denied it, instead accusing Sylvia of murdering a knight and fleeing. The council fell silent beneath his roar, bowing despite their doubts. Alone, the emperor muttered that he must release them, sensing events slipping from his grasp. His thoughts were interrupted by Duke Alexavier, demanding to know where his wife was. The emperor feigned ignorance, but Alexavier pressed harder, citing Sylvia's revelation that he had locked Bernice away. Lies spilled from Zudicus's mouth even as a black aura coiled around him, whispering poison. Before corruption could take root, Maximus entered and commanded Alexavier to return to his state. Bound by promise, Alexavier departed, leaving father and son to face one another. The emperor's rage boiled, but Maximus did not flinch. He accused his father of twisting Alexavier into a monster, of orchestrating past wars for his own schemes, and of sinking deeper into greed. Zudicus denied him, but Maximus declared that if he did not stop, he would take another path, even if it meant standing against his own blood. His suspicions hardened when guards confirmed Sylvia had never entered or left the palace, and he realized every thread led back to his father. When the council demanded that Maximus be sent to war to gain strength and experience, the emperor raged at their defiance. In his mind, the supreme god mocked him, dredging up the truth he had buried, how he was never meant for the throne, how he slaughtered his siblings, married off his sister, and even hired mercenaries to kill her. He relived the moment he drove his blade into Libina Agnes and her husband, savoring their suffering. Paranoid that his confession had been overheard, he murdered the mercenaries who once served him, but when he turned, the royal guard and judicial council were already waiting with Maximus among them. Stripped of his throne, Zudicus raged, only for Maximus to confront him with his crimes and dark worship. Shackled, the fallen emperor cursed as the supreme god seethed, but the deity recoiled when it failed to possess Maximus, who declared that no shadow could bend him from his duty. Maximus announced his father's dethronement, the news spreading swiftly. The empress confronted him in horror, begging him to remember his blood, but Maximus remained unmoved, declaring that crime was crime regardless of family. When she reminded him that without his father he would not be crown prince, he rejected her coldly, saying he would rather renounce the title than live under the shame of such parents. He sent word to Alexavier that justice had come. Returning to his state, Alexavier was met with anxious workers and a letter that revealed the emperor himself had murdered his parents. Fury consumed him, but his people urged caution. In the dungeons he confronted Grant, his former butler, exposing him as a spy for the emperor complicit in his parents' deaths and Bernice's attempted murder. He beat him savagely before ordering him caged and taken to the palace as proof. He then summoned Vix, dressing her as a princess, telling her she was no longer his servant but his ward and warning her to remain silent until the truth was revealed. When she pressed about the Duchess, he admitted Bernice had vanished beyond even the reach of holy blades, and that Noxus itself had abandoned him. Heavy with silence, they journeyed to the palace where Maximus awaited them. The crown prince's eyes lingered on the young woman, but Alexavier told him the truth would soon be revealed. Inside the great court, the dethroned emperor sat caged like a criminal. Alexavier presented Grant, who confessed he had acted under imperial orders, confirming the emperor's guilt. Then Alexavier brought Vix forward, declaring her the lost princess Vixara Jessica Bellinus, rightful heir and daughter of the murdered Empress Jessica. Gasps filled the court as proof was shown, though Vix herself faltered in disbelief. The emperor denied, but the council pressed with cold questions until chaos struck. Arrows flew into the chamber, one piercing Vixara's shoulder. Bleeding, she steadied herself and declared she now understood why her aunt had told her not to weep when truth came, but to take revenge. She was rushed from the hall, only for the palace physician to betray her, forcing poison into her veins before Alexavier tore him away and ordered his arrest. Shaking with fury, he vowed this was why he had kept her hidden so long, for now the empire's buried truth was awakening, and those who feared it would stop at nothing to silence her. Alexavier's voice cut like steel as he commanded the guards to fetch a real doctor, his urgency echoing through the chamber. The princess's lips had begun to turn blue, and panic swept the palace. Maximus, stripped of all princely composure, bolted through the halls crying for help. When told there were no physicians left within the empire, he wasted no time, riding into the night toward the tribal borders. Exhaustion gnawed him, yet desperation carried him to the hidden cave. With pleas and defiance, he forced his way before the tribal ruler, begging for aid. News of the emperor's capture swayed the court, though anger burned when the ruler learned his daughter had not returned. Maximus vowed to find her, but first he would save the lost princess. A skilled physician was entrusted to him, and though the journey back nearly broke him, he endured until collapsing at the palace gates. Guards carried him to safety, while Alexavier, unwavering, swore that no harm would come to the prince while the princess still fought for her life. Far from them, Bernice lingered in her silent prison, starved of food and water yet still alive, sustained by something unnatural. A voice haunted her ceaselessly, whispering of the Centuria enigma and truths she could scarcely comprehend. When it conjured visions before her, she saw Alexavier tending tenderly to the poison princess, her heart shattering with the weight of betrayal. The Duke, who had never once shared her bed, now devoted himself wholly to another. Her anguish deepened when she was shown visions of him slaughtering without mercy children among his victims. Doubt and despair consumed her, memories of her 10 years of untouched marriage twisting into torment. Then came the cruel revelation: this was not her second life, but her third. Each one had ended in sorrow, and unless she broke the cycle, she would never reclaim the throne that once belonged to her in the heavenly realm. The voices left her trembling, her will to live collapsing under the weight of betrayal and truth. Her first life returned to her in fragments. She remembered herself as Bernice Baliol, quiet and lonely, gazing often through windows as if waiting for someone who never came. Her father, Marquis Kale, had promised her future away when the North Duchess arrived, proposing marriage to Alexavier Agnes. Though her nanny pleaded desperately against it, warning of the man's cruelty and monstrous reputation, Kale refused to listen. Bernice submitted quietly, and soon the day came when she stood before Alexavier as his bride. The ceremony was swift and loveless, his voice flat, his kiss devoid of warmth. The crowd applauded, but her heart whispered that she had been bound to a man without feeling, perhaps truly the monster the world claimed. Her fears proved true from the beginning. On the ride to Ablia, the Duchess, now her mother-in-law, warned her coldly that she might carry the title of Duchess, but true power remained in her hands. Bernice obeyed meekly, only to be set apart and hidden within the mansion. On her wedding night Alexavier excused himself, insisting neither had wished for this union. She curled up alone, Nanny's warnings echoing that gossip would soon follow. By dawn she was already treated not as a bride, but as a puppet, dressed and painted to please appearances. At breakfast, the Duchess taunted her with veiled mockery, while Alexavier remained distant. Soon Bernice was called into her mother-in-law's study and burdened with ledgers filled with incomplete accounts. When she tried to understand, even summoning a maid to clarify wages, she was punished brutally. A slap sent her to the floor, her cheeks crushed in the Duchess's grip as accusations of greed were spat into her face. She was ordered to work through the night without food or rest. Bleeding and trembling, she struggled on until her nose poured red across the ledgers. In the dead of night she stumbled to the kitchen for water, only to be caught by Alexavier. His voice carried an edge of concern, demanding answers when he saw her swollen face, but Bernice offered him nothing, fleeing back to her punishment. By dawn she still labored, weak and shaking, until the maids pulled her away to wash. At breakfast she forced smiles, denying hunger even as her eyes betrayed the sorrow she could no longer hide. The maid lingered anxiously at Bernice's door, pleading to bring her food, but Bernice refused with weary finality, unwilling to drag anyone else into her suffering. Moments later, the Duchess stormed in, her fury swift and merciless. Ledgers struck Bernice's face, reopening her wound, and insults cut deeper still. Dragged by the hair, shoved against scattered papers, she was accused of cunning schemes to turn Alexavier against his mother. Ordered to recreate the ledgers so they appeared unchanged, Bernice was left bleeding and shaken. When Alexavier entered soon after, suspicion clouded his gaze at the disarray. Bernice lied quickly, feigning clumsiness with soil and plants, masking the truth of her torment. His questions pressed harder. Where had she been the night before, when he had searched for her in vain? She faltered, but before she could confess, the Duchess swept in with urgent summons. The princess was gravely ill, and she and her son were called to the emperor. Bernice was left behind once more, watching them depart without a backward glance. Alone, she worked tirelessly through the night, transcribing ledgers until her fingers ached, staining the fresh pages with coffee to mimic age. By dawn, exhaustion consumed her, but her task was complete. The next morning, with the Duchess still away, Bernice was forced to assume command of the household. She organized the servants with quiet precision, assigning duties with unexpected authority. For the first time, she sat to breakfast of her own choosing, a modest sandwich and warm milk. The fragile peace broke when a starving old man was brought before her, begging for food for his village. Moved, she ordered expired supplies to be distributed, only for the Duchess to return, twisting the act into a slight against her rule. Dragged into the study, Bernice was struck down with an iron rod. Blood blurred her vision until Alexavier's voice pierced the haze, his anger demanding a doctor as he held her fading body. When she awoke, he was at her side, gentle for the first time, offering water, apology, even his presence. Yet his words rang hollow to her ears. The next morning, at table with him and his mother, their false concern cut her more deeply than wounds. Forced again into silence, she endured their performance, then faced the Duchess's venom alone, mockery of her father, dismissal of her worth, scorn for the marriage itself. Bernice retreated to the storage room, where she worked until she collapsed, trapped behind a locked door. Fighting her way free with a plank, she stumbled into the hall, gasping for air before darkness claimed her again. Her mind reeled with betrayal. Alexavier found her bleeding, reaching to help, but she pushed him away, declaring through trembling fury that all trust was gone. In front of servants and the Duchess, she demanded divorce, her voice sharp with truth. The ledgers, the hunger, the beatings, the imprisonment, all denied as delusions. Yet Alex Xavier, shaken, refused. Desperation broke his calm mask. He confessed he had wanted the marriage, that he checked on her nightly, that fear of being seen as a monster kept him distant. Pressing his forehead to hers, he begged her not to leave, his voice trembling with both terror and tenderness. For the first time, she wavered, agreeing to give him time. That night, she let herself sleep with him watching over her, torn between disbelief and fragile hope. Morning brought confusion anew. He insisted she call him Alex, teased her with warmth, and even sought to tend her wounds himself, driving her into retreat behind locked doors. His sudden devotion unsettled her more than his coldness had. Later, when he scolded her for disrespecting his mother, Bernice's bitterness hardened into steel. If he would not believe her, then she would uncover the truth herself. Marching into the Duchess's study, she seized the seat that symbolized her chains, declaring herself the true Duchess of Ablia. With calm authority, she ordered her mother-in-law confined to her chambers, reclaiming the place once used to break her. Alone in the chair, her thoughts turned inward. Why had she been chosen as a puppet? Why targeted, when any girl could have taken her place? Her eyes narrowed as the question pressed against her heart. What is the mystery? She whispered. Seated at the Duchess's place, Bernice felt the weight of her new authority pressing upon her. This was no longer about mere survival, it was a fight for truth. She penned a letter to her father, demanding to know why her marriage had been arranged so abruptly, why the Duchess had chosen her despite such clear disdain. When Alex Xavier entered with the monthly budget, Bernice confronted him, reminding him of the nights she had bled over the ledgers, only to find her work erased and replaced with his mother's hand. He dismissed her accusations, siding once again with the Duchess. Enraged, Bernice declared her right as Duchess and led servants to search her mother-in-law's chambers, but the rooms were spotless, empty of proof. Mocked as delusional, she vowed to uncover the truth one day, even if Alex Xavier doubted her. Their quarrel was cut short by an imperial summons. War had broken out, and the emperor demanded Alex Xavier's presence. Bernice, sharp and unyielding, ordered the messenger to reply that the crown prince and emperor themselves should bleed first before summoning her husband. Alex Xavier bristled, warning she had gone too far, but Bernice silenced him. Keep the monster leashed, she told him coldly. That night, the Duchess accused her of selfishness, of binding Alex Xavier for her own gain. Bernice's confidence wavered. Was she clinging to him for herself? When Alex Xavier found her shaken, he asked for her permission to go to war. Her heart trembled, this feared duke sought her consent. Through tears she gave it, then locked herself away, confessing only to the dark that perhaps she had fallen for him. At dawn he stood in armor, calling for her. She refused to see him off, but his persistence broke her resolve. Swept into his arms, she was kissed with desperate hunger, his lips and tongue igniting a fire she could not deny. When he finally pulled away, he vowed that upon his return there would be no more talk of divorce. Bernice's heart ached as she whispered into the silence he left behind, "Come back, Alex." 6 months passed with no word. Supplies in Ablia dwindled, and unrest spread. Bernice gave out the mansion's provisions, silencing the Duchess's sneers with defiance, but the ledgers confirmed her fear. The coffers would not last. Determined, she set out for the capital, traveling for days without rest. When at last she reached the palace, she accused the emperor directly before his court, demanding why Ablia starved while other regions thrived. Her challenge silenced the hall, and though the emperor promised aid, Bernice received only a fraction of what was due. From the shadows, she caught the princess's smirk, her sudden health at odds with her rumored illness. Bernice returned home uneasy, her body broken from the journey, only to be confronted again by her mother-in-law, who sneered that she was nothing but a substitute. A letter from her father confirmed the same bitter truth. 3 years dragged on without Alex Xavier. Protesters gathered outside the mansion, blaming Bernice for sending their duke to war, accusing her of comfort while he bled. She silenced them with piercing logic, but their words lingered. Later, over coffee, her mother-in-law's mask slipped further, admitting Bernice was merely a placeholder, reminding her that Alex Xavier's heart belonged elsewhere, to someone who would return. Bernice's fury burned as she demanded proof, but the Duchess's answer was a cruel promise. Alex would never love her, for he had sworn it to his mother. The claim tore through Bernice's memories, leaving her uncertain whom to believe. Before she could untangle her doubts, a maid announced an unexpected visitor. The attorney, pale and trembling, come with urgent news. The attorney's hands trembled as he revealed the truth, and Bernice listened in growing disbelief. Her marriage, he explained, had been bound to a 4-year contract, signed in her own hand. Memory surfaced of her father urging her to sign papers long ago, claiming they were for a bank account. Realization struck like a blade. Her father had deceived her, using her as a pawn to secure Excalibur's inheritance. Betrayal burned in her veins, but her voice remained steady as she questioned the attorney. When he confirmed that Alex Xavier's will would also decide whether the marriage ended or continued, she thanked him coldly and dismissed him. Alone, despair gripped her. A substitute. A pawn. Even her marriage was nothing but a cruel bargain. Her mother-in-law descended upon her, demanding to see the attorney, but Bernice faced her head-on, declaring she knew everything. For a moment, fear flickered in the Duchess's eyes before twisting into a cruel smile. Bernice, weary, turned away, vowing only that she would wait for Alex Xavier to return and answer with his own mouth. That night, voices echoed in her chamber, phantoms warning she had broken a rule, that she no longer belonged in this realm. Shaken, she tried to dismiss them as madness, but sleep came only with dread. Dreams swept her into visions of blood and angels, a knight begging for life, an angel reluctantly granting it with a warning of a harsher death to come. She woke unsettled, her body trembling as though the dream clung to her. A maid coaxed her to eat, but Bernice's mind was fixed on the tea invitation from the imperial princess. Refusal would mean insult, and the empire would not forgive her twice. She resolved to attend. Before leaving, she wrote a final letter to her father, pouring out her fury. She accused him of casting her aside for Excalibur, binding her into a loveless contract for ambition's sake. She renounced him, declaring she would never return even if Alex Xavier abandoned her. With trembling resolve, she sent the letter, then left for the boutique, determined to prepare for the gathering. In Ablia's marketplace, her presence ignited fury. Stones struck her, blood streaming down her face as the people shouted that she had sent their duke to war and lived in luxury while they suffered. Her maid shielded her, dragging her back into the carriage. Broken and bloodied, she returned to the mansion, where her mother-in-law mocked her weakness and called her shameless. Bernice retreated in silence, her fists clenched until her nails pierced her palms. That night, she dreamed again of the angel and the knight, of fate bending only once, of choices that could not be undone. When morning came, the maids prepared her carefully for the tea party, dressing her in gowns Alex Xavier had purchased before their marriage. Their gentle words touched her, though she wondered if he had once bought them for another. Masking her wounds, she set out for the capital. At the princess's garden, whispers followed her steps. Bernice carried herself with quiet dignity, bowing low before Vixara, who greeted her with scorn thinly veiled by courtesy. The princess fired the maid who announced Bernice, but Bernice defended the girl, forcing the princess into retreat. Seated at the table, Bernice endured barbed remarks about her absent husband, the loneliness of Ablia, and her supposed failures. With poise, she turned each insult back, speaking of Alex Xavier with warmth that stunned the gathering. Her cheeks flushed as she recalled his farewell kiss, and her words painted him as gentle and romantic. The ladies gasped in awe, their envy shifting into admiration, while the princess ceded. Unable to bear it, Vixara ended the tea abruptly, but the women clustered around Bernice, begging for details. Pressed, she lied, claiming sleepless nights filled with passion, hiding the truth of a marriage untouched. Their delight turned her into an unexpected heroine, and for once, she left with allies rather than enemies. Yet as her carriage rolled away, her heart ached with unanswered questions. Why has he never written? Why does silence stretch between us? Will he return to claim me, or am I only clinging to shadows? Far from Ablia, Princess Vixara stormed into her father's chamber, railing against Bernice. The emperor's patience snapped, and he reminded her of her own disgrace, how she had once run away with a guard, throwing aside the chance to be duchess. He dismissed her threats, though unease clouded his thoughts as war dragged on with no end. Alex Xavier fought relentlessly, but no word reached the empire, no messenger returned. Vixara, consumed by jealousy, returned to her chambers in rage. A secret lover emerged from the shadows, and though she surrendered to him for a moment, his reminder that Alex Xavier would never abandon his wife ignited her fury. She cast him out with scorn, then ordered her maids to hire an assassin. Alone, she shattered her mirror and whispered venom into the smoke of her cigars. Bernice Belial Agnes, she swore, would not stand in her way much longer. When Bernice stepped down from the carriage, the mansion workers crowded eagerly around her, their questions tumbling over one another about the tea party and the princess. Her maid scolded them sharply, whisking her away to her chambers. They mean no harm, Bernice said gently, though exhaustion weighed her body. She lay down, but peace eluded her. The dream came again, an angel by the riverbank, waiting endlessly for her knight. At last, he appeared, staggering and bloodied, confessing with his last breath that he had fallen for her. She refused to let him go, calling back his soul with divine power, though the heavens thundered punishment upon her. As the angel surrendered to the light, Bernice jolted awake, tears streaking her face, only to freeze. Alex Xavier sat beside her, his gaze tender. Wife, he murmured. She trembled, asking if he was real, and when he confirmed, her tears spilled freely as she clung to him. You promised you'd return, she whispered. He teased her gently, surprised by her devotion, though her joy soured into anger as she accused him of never writing. His shock was genuine. He swore he had sent letters nightly, though none had ever reached her. She forgave the mystery in a heartbeat, embracing him fiercely, declaring her right as his wife to hold him, even as he pressed her, smirking, to admit whether she loved him. Their moment was shattered when his mother barged in, sweeping him away with demands that he attend to matters in the capital, where the princess, she claimed, lay deathly ill. Bernice resisted fiercely, clinging to her husband's arm and declaring she would not part from him again. The Duchess bristled, but Alexavier sided with his wife, declaring she would accompany him. Once alone in the carriage, Bernice confronted him with the truth she had learned of their marriage contract. His jaw hardened, and he pulled her onto his lap with reckless urgency, silencing her protests with teasing touches and a kiss that left her breathless. He whispered that she belonged to him for life, no matter what schemes others wove around them. Yet when they arrived in the capital, her resolve faltered as she watched him obey the Emperor's command to comfort Princess Vixara, who clung to him shamelessly, weeping his name. Bernice's fury boiled over. She declared before them all that she no longer felt like his wife, daring even to defy the Emperor himself before storming from the chamber. Mocked by her mother-in-law for being abandoned, Bernice struck back with sharp cunning. If Alexavier was to wed the princess, then she demanded Crown Prince Maximus in return. The Duchess, though stunned, agreed to arrange it. Alone, Bernice's heart ached, yet when Alexavier came pounding at her door, she refused him, declaring the marriage finished. Her anger spilled into bitter thoughts of the Crown Prince. Whether as royalty or as lover, she would not yield easily. Dreams returned, showing Aurelia's rebellion before the gods, her refusal to repent, her condemnation to endless cycles of life and death, her screams swallowed as she was cast down into the mortal realm. Bernice awoke to the Duchess pressing her toward a meeting with Maximus, and suspicion grew as the woman encouraged it eagerly. Still, Bernice prepared herself and found the prince in the garden. Their exchange revealed truths. The Emperor had hidden the princess's ploy, and even her brother admitted that her illness was nothing but a trap to draw Alexavier near. Bernice, quick to seize the moment, proposed a bold alliance, that she and the prince present themselves as lovers, shielding her from divorce while strengthening his claim to the throne. He agreed, but before the thought could take root, Alexavier stormed upon them in a jealous fury. Bernice met his anger with icy defiance, reminding him he had failed her as a husband. Enraged, he seized her and carried her to her chambers, declaring she belonged only to him, but she shoved him out and locked the door, her heart torn between love, betrayal, and pride. Moments later, her meal was brought, and with the first bite her throat tightened, vision blurring as poison seared her veins. Princess Vixara emerged from the shadows, eyes alight with hatred, pressing her foot cruelly against Bernice's bleeding hand as she whispered that she would finally see her rival die. Bernice's strength faded, her body collapsing as darkness closed in, just as Alexavier's voice thundered from the hall, calling her name. The door burst open, and his wife crumpled lifelessly to the floor before his eyes. Bernice woke to the heavy stillness of her chamber, the memory of choking and collapsing still sharp in her mind. A maid cried out in relief and hurried to call the Duke, but Alexavier had already burst inside, striding to her side. When he reached to steady her, she pushed him away, rising on her own. Her voice cut like a blade. "Has the culprit been caught?" His confusion only enraged her further. When he insisted it had been nothing but food poisoning, she accused him of blindness, refusing to be silenced. Summoning the guard, she demanded the maid who served her meal be brought forth. The trembling girl denied all knowledge, but before Bernice could press harder, Princess Vixara swept in, feigning concern. Bernice turned on her with sharp scorn, accusing her outright of orchestrating the poisoning. Vixara hid behind tears and cousinly affection, but her mask faltered as Crown Prince Maximus entered, declaring the poison had touched only Bernice's plate. At his command, the maid was dragged to the dungeons. He chastised Alexavier openly for his failure to defend his wife, while Bernice, trembling with rage, drove her husband from her sight. In the dungeons, Maximus pressed the maid until she confessed. Vixara had ordered the dish switched. Alexavier, stubborn, clung to excuses, claiming perhaps the princess had been the true target, until Maximus's fury boiled over. He accused the Duke of blindness, of guarding Vixara more fiercely than his own wife, of neglect that whispered of secret desire. Alexavier struck him, but the prince only smirked, warning that if the Duke would not cherish the Duchess, he himself would. Leaving the cell, Maximus stormed to Vixara's chambers, catching her in her pretense. Her tears crumbled when he leaned close and reminded her of her past cruelties. At his command, she was shackled and dragged to the dungeon, her mask of innocence falling away as she hissed a vow of open war. Before the Emperor and jury, Vixara stood bound, still feigning frailty. Maximus laid out the maid's confession, only for the Emperor to bristle, shielding his daughter with paternal bias. Maximus challenged him coldly, forcing the matter to the jury. Vixara spun lies with skill, claiming she had passed the dish in courtesy, but Bernice entered the hall, pale yet resolute, denouncing her with cutting words. The jury demanded Alexavier's testimony. When pressed, he defended the princess, dismissing his wife's suffering as jealousy. Bernice's heart broke at his betrayal. Humiliated, she fled, and when Alexavier followed, she struck him with bitter truths, his absence, his neglect, his blindness to her pain, the letters that never reached her, his mother's malice, and Vixara's heel grinding into her bleeding hand. Her fury left no room for forgiveness. She vowed divorce, slamming the door on his pleas, whispering alone in her chamber that she would sooner end her life than remain Vixara's shadow. The next dawn, Maximus appeared at her door, apologizing for her humiliation. She seized his hand and led him through the palace openly, declaring her intent to scandalize, to weaponize rumor, to avenge herself. Whispers trailed their every step, fuel for the fire she intended to unleash. They confronted Vixara directly, Bernice announcing boldly that if the princess claimed the duke, then she would claim the prince. She threatened to become Vixara's sister-in-law, promising to make her life a torment. The hall erupted when Alex Xavier appeared, demanding a word with his wife. She dismissed him coldly, leaning instead on Maximus's arm. The prince declared he would take her openly if Alex Xavier clung to the princess. The duke's fury flared, but Bernice silenced him with scorn, severing the word wife from his lips. Before the gathered crowd, she claimed her right to walk with the prince, leaving Alex Xavier humiliated. To Maximus she confided calmly that every word was fuel for her greater plan, whether to destroy her enemies or seize the crown itself. But in the emperor's chamber, darker plots stirred. Vixara raged against her father's indifference, demanding he forbid Bernice from entering the family. The emperor rebuked her selfishness, doubting even her blood, and dismissed her in fury. Alone, he muttered of Bernice's unyielding nature, his unease deepening. Soon after, Princess Libina, Vixara, and the former duchess gathered in secret, their voices sharp with desperation. Libina confessed she had chosen Bernice only for convenience, never foreseeing her defiance. Now, she insisted, only blood would restore balance. The crown prince must die. The emperor stormed at her suggestion, but a sudden blow struck his skull. As he collapsed, Libina and the princess screamed of assassins, drawing guards to conceal the truth. When Maximus arrived, Libina spun lies of an attacker's escape, while inwardly she planned his death as well. She crept later to the emperor's chamber, leaning over his unconscious form, whispering that she would finish what she had begun. Interrupted by the physician, she masked her intent, leaving with a sweet smile. But in the council hall, her fury mounted as ministers revealed the emperor had already entrusted Maximus with governance in his absence. Libina's hands clenched within her sleeves, her mind churning with blood and ambition. If the emperor lives, I fail. If Maximus rises, I fall. They must both be erased. The ministers gathered in the audience chamber, their voices heavy with unease. Libina pressed her case with practiced grace, arguing that both of the emperor's children should share power. The ministers pushed back, pointing to Vixara's frailty and Maximus's clear appointment as crown prince. Maximus smirked, exposing her ploys, and when he confronted her directly, his words were sharper than any blade. He would never yield the throne to her schemes. Libina countered with poison-laced silk, warning that wills could be changed and that his father's weakness left him vulnerable. The meeting ended with her mask intact, but beneath it her fury seethed. She planted a note in the emperor's chamber and swept away, leaving the palace in staged urgency with the duke and his wife at her side, whispers following like smoke. Bernice returned to the duchy with a weight of betrayal pressing on her heart. Her maids rejoiced at her arrival, but their joy faltered at her distant silence. Alex Xavier confronted her almost immediately, his jealousy burning. She dismissed him coldly, accusing him of defiling himself with the princess, of failing her as husband, protector, and partner. When he demanded answers about Maximus, she cut him with bitter laughter, asking in what role he presumed to question her, husband, master, or mere purchaser. His fury broke against her scorn, and though he stormed out, he returned to find his mother calmly preparing her daughter's dismissal. The Duchess declared Bernice's barren years unforgivable and announced Alex Xavier's remarriage to Vixara. Bernice's world tilted, yet she forced composure, bowing to the decree even as her chest burned. But when she turned to leave, Alex Xavier shattered the silence, declaring he would marry no one but her. Bernice challenged him, demanding why he remained silent under his mother's words, why he let betrayal stand unopposed. At last the truth surfaced. Their marriage had been nothing but a contract, signed in deceit. Bernice flung the revelation at him with venom, exposing the 4-year pact meant to discard her once Vixara returned. Alex Xavier reeled, swearing ignorance, but before he could recover, Vixara intruded, mocking and staking her claim. Bernice, undaunted, lashed back, declaring herself the true wife, the only wife, while the princess seethed with rage. Confrontations multiplied. Bernice stormed to her mother's chambers, demanding answers for the betrayal. The Duchess admitted the contract's truth without shame, revealing her ambition to replace Bernice with Vixara as she had always intended. Alex Xavier arrived, shattering under the weight of her confession. His fury at his mother's schemes burst forth, demanding the cursed contract so he might destroy it. When denied, he seized Bernice's hand and pulled her from the chamber, swearing that she alone was his wife. In the corridor, remorse softened his fire, and Bernice, though weary, touched his lips to silence his self-loathing. For a fleeting breath, they found fragile peace, until Vixara reappeared, weeping and begging to stay as his concubine. Alex Xavier's rejection was merciless. There was no place for her, only Bernice. The princess turned on Bernice with venom, hurling accusations of witchcraft, deceit, and the theft of what should have been hers. Bernice met her with icy disdain, exposing her false sickness and cowardly escape years ago. Vixara stormed away, only for fate to tighten the noose. A letter meant for her fell into Bernice's hands, revealing an assassination carried out at her order. Bernice confronted her boldly, brandishing the damning proof. The princess faltered, then lunged to destroy the evidence, but Bernice held firm. Their struggle ended when Alex Xavier entered, and Vixara dissolved into tears, twisting truth into lies. The letter turned blank in Bernice's hands, the proof gone, leaving her accused of jealousy. Alex Xavier wavered, and Bernice's heart shattered. She declared the contract finished, the marriage over, and left him at her door, whispering bitterly that he always begged but never changed. His attempts to investigate only deepened the chaos. He warned Vixara that her crimes would be laid bare, ordered her confined, and left for the capital. The princess, desperate, confessed to the mistress that she had indeed ordered a man's death, the soldier she once fled with, fearing exposure would ruin her. When left alone, her fear curdled into hatred. She stormed into Bernice's chamber, ripping her hair and spitting venom of low birth and worthlessness. Bernice struck back with cutting words, exposing her past shame and falsehoods. Enraged, Vixara seized a knife and lunged. In the struggle, the blade plunged not into Bernice, but into her loyal maid, who had leapt between them. Blood pooled across the floor as the girl gasped her last, whispering that Bernice's safety was all that mattered. Servants froze, horror in their eyes, as the princess stood with bloodied hands and the duchess wept over her maid's dying body. Bernice pressed her trembling hands against the gaping wound, blood slipping between her fingers as she screamed for a doctor. The maid was slipping away, and tears blurred her vision. "Don't die, you're the only one who ever understood me," she whispered. But Vixara's voice sliced through the chamber, accusing her of wielding the knife, of staging her grief. The servants, shaken by the sight of blood on Bernice's hands, pulled the wounded girl away despite her pleas, leaving her locked inside as the princess gloated, calling her a murderer abandoned by all. Far away, Alex reached the capital where Crown Prince Maximus awaited him. They confronted the princess's maids, but none confessed, only the old servant held her silence, even as the prince threatened her life. Maximus, consumed by anger, revealed to Alex a memory of his childhood, how Vixara had once nearly drowned him, a rope half-cut in her hands. He accused her of poison, deceit, and murder, urging Alex to open his eyes. But the Duke, torn between loyalty and doubt, could not condemn her outright. News of the stabbing soon reached them, and Alex rushed back to Ablia while Maximus pressed on, vowing to break the maid's silence by threatening their kin. In the imperial palace, he confided his fury to the bedridden emperor, begging for answers, when suddenly the old man's fingers twitched faintly in his hand. The doctors dismissed it as illusion, but Maximus was convinced. He summoned apothecaries, searching desperately for proof that assassins and poison were nothing but Vixara's fabrications. Meanwhile, Alex arrived at his estate, where the maid lay near death and suspicion fell heavily upon Bernice. The servants cried for justice, the mistress of the house hardened against her, and Vixara fanned the flames with feigned innocence. Alex alone stood firm, declaring that when the maid awoke, the truth would clear his wife's name. Yet behind his back, Vixara plotted, slipping into Bernice's locked chamber to mock her, swearing Alex would never choose her again. When the physician declared the maid beyond saving, the servants clamored for Bernice's execution, and Vixara cloaked herself in their pity. But in secret, she conspired with the mistress, who pressed into her hand a pouch of potent powder. That night, dressed in silk and perfumed with aphrodisiac, Vixara entered Alex's chamber, pressing herself against him with shameless desire. His anger flared, but the drug clouded his senses as she forced him back upon the bed, whispering that once she bore his child, he would never escape her. Even as his body weakened, Alex's heart strained against her touch. "No. I want my wife. I need my wife," he groaned, clinging to Bernice's image, her face and voice piercing through the haze, the only anchor keeping him from surrender. Alexander lay under the weight of the drug, vision clouded, limbs sluggish, his mind reaching blindly for comfort. "Bernice, is it you?" he whispered hoarsely. Vixara bent close, her tone dipped in false sweetness. "Yes, Alex. Your wife. Can't you feel me against you?" She pressed his hand to her body, her breath hot against his ear. "Did you think I would ever let you go? Tonight, you are mine." His clouded eyes softened, mistaking her for the one he longed for. "I always wanted you close," he murmured, pulling her toward him. Triumph curled across Vixara's lips as she slipped from her robe, intent on sealing her deception. But a violent pounding shattered the chamber doors. "Open this door," a voice cried. Snarling, she covered herself and stormed to the threshold, only to find Bernice, trembling, her fists bloodied from knocking. Why are you here?" Vixara hissed. Bernice faltered, words caught in her throat, but Vixara's smile turned vicious. You couldn't resist, could you? You came to witness your own ruin." She let her gown fall suggestively from one shoulder. "Or did you hope to join us?" Bernice's voice quivered. "I want to see him. Only then will I believe." But Alexander's voice called from within, tender and raw, "Wife, come back. I can't wait any longer." Bernice staggered, her heart breaking as Vixara smirked. "Do you hear? He calls for me, not you. You were never wanted. From the beginning, he chose me." She dragged Bernice into the room, forcing her to face Alexander sprawled bare on the bed. "Look at him. This is my man. Leave us forever." With cruel strength, she hurled Bernice into the hall, where she collapsed, sobbing against the stair rail. From the shadows stepped the mistress, her voice cold as stone. "The maid is dead. No witness remains. Tomorrow, Bernice Baliol dies." Vixara's laughter rang triumphant. "Did you hear, dear rival? Even fate belongs to me. Soon I will be Duchess, then Empress. You are nothing." The mistress seized Bernice, dragging her bleeding body across the marble as servants spat curses. "She killed my sister, let her rot." They dragged her into the underground cell, slammed the gate, and left her to despair. Yet her eyes burned with fury. "Yes, lock me here. Strip me of my vows, my life. I will not beg. Tell me when I die, so I may curse you all with my final breath." The mistress spat back, enraged, but Bernice's laughter echoed through the stone, wild and sharp. "You made me mad, not I. You crushed me until this curse was all that remained. May every bone in this mansion burn, may every inch of skin blister alive. That is my gift to you." The next dawn came heavy with dread. The mistress dragged Bernice out, blood trailing in her wake. Maids fell to their knees, weeping. "Mistress, release her," we erred. We were blinded by anger. The princess gains most from this. But their pleas were silenced with scorn. "The case is closed. Drag her to the square." Shackled and bleeding, Bernice laughed bitterly. "I wish you all rot in hell." The mob hurled stones as she mounted the scaffold, their hatred fueled by lies. Yet her voice rose above them. "You call me witch, but you are the monsters. You feasted on my pain, and cheered as I bled." They struck her down, gagged her cries, but her eyes seared with defiance. The mistress declared, "By the Duke's will, justice is served. Place her head on the block." Bernice's final scream cut through the crowd. "Lies. You framed me. And for that, I curse this empire to crumble, its rulers to fall, its people to starve, its heirs betrayed by the hands they trust most." The blade fell. Her head rolled across the platform, eyes still burning. Panic rippled through the crowd. "She cursed us. Her eyes still watch." The mistress seized the moment, raising her voice. "Rejoice. The Duke will remarry. His bride will be Princess Vixara." But before cheers could rise, a royal carriage drew near. The crown prince himself stepped down, his gaze falling upon the severed head. His cry of horror silenced the square. Darkness swallowed Bernice. The centurion enigma circle twisted her soul, torment without end, until a voice mocked her. "Do you recognize her, the one executed? Look closer, it was you." Her scream shook the void, but the prison cracked open. Light pierced, walls fell, and Princess Sylvia appeared. "Duchess. You escaped the circle yourself?" "Impossible." Bernice steadied, smiling faintly. "Impossible or not, I am free." Guards tried to bar her way, but she swept past with venomous grace. "The emperor rots in prison. No ruler remains. Stand aside, or I'll tell the crown prince you dared defy me." Ministers whispered as she passed. She met Vixara with a smile laced with steel. "Your Highness, heir to the throne." Vixara flinched at her formality, but Bernice's words remained sharp. "The past is gone. I live for the future, without resentment." Maximus softened her path, shielding her with gentle words, yet Bernice's gaze wandered to Alex Xavier. He dragged her aside, voice trembling. "Where were you?" "I searched everywhere." She only smiled. "I'm back, is that not enough?" His desperation grew, but she cut him off. "Our marriage was convenience, bound by contract. That contract has expired. I am free." He faltered, begging her to reconsider, but she dismissed him coldly. Yet Alex Xavier's resolve hardened. What if reason enough to continue this marriage is not convenience, but love? Bernice laughed without mirth. "Love? I have long forgotten such folly. The man I loved was a traitor, every word a lie." But he pressed, telling her to hold grudges, to sharpen her anger into strength. Her smile turned predatory. "Very well. If you wish to help, then aid my revenge." At that moment, the voice of her holy sword returned, loyal as ever. She mocked its absence, though her laughter carried a deeper wound. Outside, she faced Vixara and Maximus again, her smile unsettling. Vixara trembled with guilt, but Bernice's voice dripped with double-edged sweetness. "Punished? Would you punish yourself, princess, for lying in my husband's bed while I was dragged to my death, Sylvia whispered to Maximus, warning him that Bernice had changed, that she bore secrets tied to the supreme god. But Maximus dismissed it, while Bernice demanded to see the imprisoned emperor. Led into the shadows, she stepped into his cell alone. The emperor raised his head, disbelief in his eyes. You, how did you escape the supreme god's grasp? Her smile was calm, edged with cruelty. I was destined to break free. Just as you were destined to rot here. His chains rattled as he roared, I am the emperor. She laughed coldly. You are nothing but a prisoner, a shadow choking on the pain you sowed. And she drew a hidden blade from her shoe, her voice dropping to a razor whisper. I have waited for this moment. Tell me, your majesty, why should I not end you here and now? The emperor's voice cracked, confusion laced with dread. What do you mean? Bernice's laugh was low, edged in ice. You haven't figured it out yet? I'm here to strip away the veil from your so-called god. Sparks hissed as she dragged a shard of metal across the stone floor. Where is your god now? Does he hear you? Will he save you? The emperor's bravado faltered. My god is with me, he whispered, though his voice shook. Bernice raised the shard close to his throat, only to be interrupted by the crown prince's call. Snapping back to the present, she concealed the blade. Yes, she said smoothly, but I require one more thing. I ask to remain within the palace. The crown prince welcomed her stay. As she left, her hand pressed the emperor's key into a hidden mold of paste. He won't escape my justice. Yet her return unsettled those around her. Vixara confronted her. Why are you so distant? Have I done something? Bernice's reply was cutting. You are not the girl I knew. Be yourself, or others will mistake you for my maid. After all, you were the princess I tormented, painted as my victim. That makes me the villain once again. Soon after, the empress approached. Their exchange was sharp, Bernice reminding her that until cleared of suspicion, she held no true power. The duke tried to intervene, but Bernice's venom cut him down too. If I do not touch you, why should you touch me? I do not tolerate transgressions. Back in her chambers, she tried to forge the stolen key, but the fragile mold disintegrated. Fury consumed her. Not like this. I must return. He must suffer as I did. Arios appeared. Master, what are you doing? Her cold glare cut him down. Who sent you? Why do you exist for me? If you claim loyalty, prove it, bring me the prison key itself. When he departed, a maid arrived with food. Bernice forced her to taste each dish for poison, then dismissed her coldly. Again the same games. No one is to be trusted. Vixara and the duke intruded, but Bernice drove them both out, her patience long gone. No matter the life, nothing changes. I will not waste this one. I will take revenge. When Arios returned with the true key, Bernice led him and Sylvia underground. The emperor spat venom from his cell, but Bernice only smiled and offered him a tray crawling with insects. His defiance dissolved into screams, echoing through the stone halls. That was only a taste, she said as she left. Outside, she mocked Arios. I am your master, yes, but he is your maker. Sylvia, shaken, demanded answers, and Bernice revealed that the supreme god who haunted them both had created Arios using the powers of slain gods. Moments later, the duke appeared, worried. Bernice brushed him off. Sylvia covered for her, but when pressed, she whispered only, she has suffered more than you know. Alone in the corridor, Sylvia heard a whisper, arrogant, thunderous. Who dares defy God? Fury burned brighter than fear. You are no god. I am Sylvia, tribal princess. I kneel before no false deity. The voice thundered back, exposing her hidden desires, her longing for the throne, her heart's weakness for the crown prince. Pressed beneath his threats, Sylvia sealed a binding pact with the false god, though her heart seethed with resentment. When Maximus appeared, she forced composure, claiming she wished to return home. But he pleaded with her to stay. Your testimony can expose my father's crimes. Without it, the truth may be buried. Reluctantly, she agreed. After he left, the god's voice coiled back around her. Use him. Exploit his love. Deny it all you want, you are no different from me. Meanwhile, Princess Vixara wrestled with her own awakening. Elevated overnight from maid to princess, she confessed her turmoil to the duke, who counseled caution. But alone in her chamber, her reflection whispered back at her, her truer self. The empire, the duke, all of it could be yours. Vixara recoiled. No. I cannot betray the Duchess. She gave me love when no one else did. The voice only laughed. Then regret forever. Be the timid maid once more. Her reflection's crimson eyes burned. Her vows spilled like poison. The emperor and the empress strangled my mother. I will repay them in kind. By my own hands, I will be their death. Arios followed Bernice into her chambers, his voice low but insistent. Master, tell me your next move. That is none of your concern, she answered sharply. It is my concern, he pressed. I exist because you cried out in pain. How can your choices not concern me? Her bitter laugh cut the air. Do you think this is the first time has reversed? No, Arios. This is my third life. The first ended with stones hurled at my body while my mother laughed, my husband in bed with Princess Vixara. I thought my return chance, but it has happened again and again. Shock flickered in his eyes. Even the Supreme God knows nothing of this. Heaven itself trembles at your defiance. Before she could reply, a shift tore her from her chamber. Silver skies stretched above, the heavenly realm. The lunar god awaited her. Finally, you appear, he said. And why could you not reach me, she countered. I was hidden by your supreme god, in the Centurion enchanted circle, the strongest seal of all. His face paled. That explains everything. But tell me, why do you keep returning? If even you don't know, she whispered, despair cutting her words, then who does? Their exchange ended abruptly. She vanished from his sight, leaving him unsettled. Marwa, the fake god, soon appeared. She is no ordinary mortal, Lunar admitted grimly. She broke the Centurion circle. This is not her first regression. Marwa's expression darkened. Then why was I blind to it? Unless, his thought carried him to the heavenly library, where the sentinel at its gates revealed the truth. The locked chamber could only be opened by the true heir to heaven. Realization struck. Then Marcus is no heir. Bernice Belial Agnes is. The revelation burned in him as he returned to Lunar. Together they pieced it. Bernice was no mortal at all, her regressions triggered by death, her path bending fate itself. Yet punishment from the Celestial Council must have cast her into mortality. Marwa pressed further in the library, only to be confronted by Marcus himself. The Supreme God's temper flared when Marwa hinted at the sealed door. Marcus vanished before yielding, but his hesitation told all. He could not open it either. A false heir, Marwa thought. Bernice must ascend. He crossed into the mortal realm, appearing before Bernice in the dungeon. Why do you defy fate itself? He demanded. Her eyes burned. Because the Emperor will not escape justice. Even if I must kill him with my own hands. When she drew blood from her prisoner, Marwa seized her and whisked her away before discovery. She shoved him back, furious. How dare you touch me? I saved you, he snapped. Would you rather face execution again? So what if I died? She spat. Time would rewind. I would return and finish the job. And what if it doesn't? Marwa warned. What if this time, death is final? Her smile was cold. No. I know my power. I will not stop until they all suffer. But his warning lingered. She was not mortal, and the holy sword would not answer forever. Soon after, knights summoned her to the crown prince's chamber. Accusations hung heavy. The emperor had been attacked, and all eyes turned to her. She parried each word like a blade. Suspicion without proof is nothing. If you think me guilty, bring evidence. Otherwise, do not circle me like vultures. Her departure was sharp, her resolve unshaken. When the Duke sought to soothe her, she cut him down with the truth. In another life, you said the same. You promised love, but you abandoned me. Trust given once, squandered, is not restored. Not in this life. Meanwhile, Marwa discovered Marcus's mask. The so-called supreme god was no heir at all, his reign built on lies, his power stolen. Rage uncoiled as Marcus confessed his envy. Bernice, the miracle child, had stolen his crown before birth, the oracle's darling, the true heir. He had erased memories, silenced gods, reduced immortals to ash. All to keep the throne. While Marcus vowed never to let Bernice fulfill her prophecy, chaos stirred in the palace. Vixara, placed under guard, endured suspicion with grace, though bitterness festered within. A bath prepared for her turn to torment, her skin blistering as though fire itself had kissed her flesh. Her screams echoed through the halls, knights and healers rushing in frenzy. Far away, Bernice smirked. Arios, it's time. While they are distracted, take me to him. Together they slipped unseen to the Emperor's chamber. He lay weak and trembling. Bernice released a scorpion onto his chest, savoring his terror. This is only the beginning, she whispered. His screams soon filled the palace. When guards burst into her room, she met them with her blade drawn, fury blazing at their intrusion. The Duke defended her, demanding justice for the insult. Crown Prince Maximus arrived, pressing for order, but suspicion poisoned every word. Vixara was escorted away, the Duke subdued, and the palace bristled with mistrust. Yet Bernice, behind her locked door, only smiled. They think me a pawn still? No. This time, I am the one moving the pieces. Princess Vixara's condition worsened by the hour. Her skin blistered as though fire itself had consumed her. Crown Prince Maximus stormed at the negligence, berating the maids until they were dragged to the punishment chambers. When the Empress arrived, he accused her of indifference, warning that even his mother would share the Emperor's fate if she persisted in schemes against the princess. The physician prescribed remedies, assuring her recovery, but doubts lingered. Alone with Vixara, Maximus swore she was his sister despite the Empress's scorn, though she warned him that in a palace of liars, even truth could be a trap. Meanwhile, the court erupted when Bernice demanded justice for the knights who had stormed her chambers. Maximus denied ever issuing such orders, but the jury condemned the men to prison. The Duchess left in fury, her voice cutting as she warned the prince that even without an emperor, justice would not be denied. The Empress, desperate, sought the Emperor's ear, but Maximus blocked her path and cast her out in disgrace. In the dungeon, the Emperor raged, accusing Bernice of attacking him, but the Crown Prince countered with reason. How could she be in two places at once? His words planted doubts even in his own heart. Later, the jury pressed him again, warning his name was stained by too much suspicion, while Princess Sylvia appeared with an offer to act as his unseen eyes. She promised loyalty, yet whispered to herself that Bernice was the true mastermind. Soon after, the palace was shaken by a brazen intruder, an old warrior who claimed the princess as his daughter, born of the late Empress. The court gasped, but Vixara laughed at the absurdity, cutting his tail to pieces until he crumbled under her words. The Empress seized the chance to turn suspicion against Duke Alexavier, accusing him of elevating Vixara for his own ambition. Outrage flared, but Bernice silenced the hall with a calm, brutal truth. If the Empress herself once rose from concubine to crown, why should she condemn a duke for desiring a princess? The court reeled as Bernice swept out, though her composure faltered once alone. She whispered to herself that the Vixara she remembered was not the girl who now stood so boldly at the center of intrigue. Her unease deepened when Alexavier came to her chambers, his temper fierce. He accused her of carelessly fueling scandal, but she answered with cool detachment, admitting she had always known Vixara's identity. When she spoke of leaving once her mission was done, his desperation shattered restraint. He closed the space between them, his voice a vow and a threat, declaring he would no longer keep his distance. His hands, his breath, his presence overwhelmed her until her protests faltered and her body trembled against him, betrayed by desire. He summoned servants to move into her chambers, claiming her as wife at last, while she collapsed weakly in the aftermath, shaken by his sudden ferocity. Alone, Bernice whispered the warning she carried like a brand, "Do not waver, or you will repeat this life again." She summoned Arios, admitting that the Duke's intrusion left her cornered, unable to act. So she turned instead to Princess Sylvia, entrusting her with a vile and a dangerous mission. To infiltrate the Emperor's hidden chamber and force him to drink the potion that would twist the balance further. Sylvia accepted with unflinching resolve, though Bernice warned that another shadow moved against the Emperor, unseen and unknown. When Bernice withdrew into solitude, her vow hardened into steel. Whatever schemes unfolded, whatever gods or mortals opposed her, she would not falter. Not this time. Duke Alexavier confronted Bernice the moment she entered, insisting her heart had summoned him despite her rejection. She lashed out with venom, reminding him of the year she wasted in a cell while he lavished his attention on Princess Vixara. His composure faltered, and in desperation he confessed the truth of his torment, his defiance of the Emperor, the silent night, the fruitless searches, and the disgrace that drove him to drink. He begged her to stop wounding him with the same accusations, but Bernice's heart remained cold. Their marriage, she declared, had always been a convenience, and she vowed to keep it that way. She divided the bed with pillows, yet the Duke only smirked, slipping beside her. For the first time in over a year they lay together, his whispers teasing her until sleep claimed them both. At dawn, she woke with a scream to find herself resting on his chest. He teased her mercilessly, claiming she had crossed the line in her sleep, even murmuring his name. Flustered, she tried to silence him, but he only kissed her palm and confessed he could no longer restrain his desire to claim her fully as his wife. Her anger rose, and she summoned her maids, yet the Duke lingered, brushing off one servant's advances with icy disdain. When Bernice caught sight of the girl hovering near him, her fury erupted. Seizing the maid's chin, she demanded the truth. The maid broke quickly, confessing the Empress herself had sent her to tempt the Duke. Bernice dragged the girl by the hair through the corridors, ignoring her pleas, and flung her at the Empress's feet in the garden. The confrontation was brutal. Bernice accused her openly of sending pawns to seduce her husband, as once she had seduced the Emperor to rise from concubine to Empress. The Empress's fury could barely be contained, but Bernice's words struck deep, cutting away her dignity. When threats followed, Bernice only laughed, promising that her downfall would come swiftly. She returned to her chamber to find Alexavier waiting in nothing but a robe, damp from his bath. His nearness made her shiver, but she shoved him away, vowing to vanish from his life once her task was done. His smirk faltered, though he masked his pain with a vow to chase her across mountains if she fled. Far away, tribal Princess Sylvia cloaked herself in black and slipped into the Emperor's hidden chamber. She woke him with a kick, revealing herself not as Bernice's pawn but as a woman who had survived his execution order. She uncorked a vial, forcing it between his lips despite his commands and pleas. The liquid burned through him, leaving him paralyzed, his body twisted and broken. Sylvia laughed coldly, only to falter when she noticed fresh footprints in the soil, proof that another intruder had been watching. Alarmed, she hurried back, her path intercepted by Crown Prince Maximus, who pressed her with suspicion. With practiced deceit, she evaded his questions and reached Bernice's chamber, where she confessed what she had found. Bernice's eyes narrowed. There was indeed another enemy cloaked in the palace shadows. That night they searched the gardens together, but found only fresh barefoot prints and a gardener working under moonlight. The mystery unsettled them, yet they could not linger. Returning to her chambers, Bernice was cornered again by Alex Xavier. He challenged her coldness, mocking their marriage of convenience and demanding she admit what she felt. She resisted fiercely, but when he drew close, his touch betrayed unexpected tenderness, and his gaze refused to waver. She shoved him away and built her wall of pillows once more, though his laughter lingered. Morning brought another scream as she woke again in his arms. He teased her shamelessly, demanding a kiss. She silenced him with one of her own, bold and deliberate, leaving him flushed and speechless. Before he could recover, a summons came. Crown Prince Maximus required him in haste. Together they went to the Emperor's chamber, where the sight was grim. The once mighty ruler lay contorted, unable to move or speak, his body twisted by some incurable affliction. Maximus feared the court would accuse him of silencing his father, and suspicion already fell on Sylvia. When she entered feigning innocence, his doubts sharpened, and he dragged her into his chamber, dropping his mask. He accused her of ambition, of hungering for the throne. She smirked, admiring his boldness, and in turn he revealed his own truth. He too schemed for power and needed allies to secure it. Their exchange was sharp, a dance of suspicion and attraction, each recognizing in the other a dangerous partner. In that moment, an unspoken pact was forged, fragile, treacherous, and bound by ambition. The supreme god's fury shook the chamber as Marcus Fulcinius Eumenius, the false heir, bared his venom. The library guardian stood firm, declaring that Bernice's punishment was not yet complete, that her memories had been spared because Marcus lacked the strength to erase them. Rage and doubt warred within him as truths surfaced, the slaughter of gods, the theft of memories, the night when the heavenly princess had chosen a mortal over him. His anguish broke into a bitter confession. He had never forgotten her execution, never escaped the torment of watching the woman he loved die. Pressed by the guardian, Marcus revealed more. He had embraced forbidden arts, wielding dark magic despite the curse it brought, learning what Aurelia herself once defied heaven for. Yet even as his sins spilled forth, he mocked the guardian, claiming no punishment could touch him until the true heir reclaimed her throne. With bitter laughter, he vanished, leaving silence and unease in his wake. When Lunar and the god of fate Muarwa arrived, the guardian opened the hidden library of the heavens, its shelves blazing with forbidden knowledge. There he revealed the truth. Aurelia's exile had not been mere punishment, but the cost of her love for a mortal. Each death she endured was part of her cycle, each rebirth a reminder of loss. And yet, he warned, her trust remained her greatest weakness. Far below, Bernice wrestled with the fragments of memory, torn between denial and the whispers of her true identity. If she had once been the heavenly princess, then who was the mortal she had risked everything for? Her thoughts were shattered by Alex Xavier's sudden arrival. He confessed that their marriage was no accident, that he had sought her from the moment they were children, when her kindness had pierced his grief. She accused him of lies, yet his words carried the weight of devotion too deep to deny. His love, fierce and unyielding, cornered her as much as his body did, until his lips claimed hers with 100 years in the making. Bernice resisted, but her heart betrayed her. His kisses deepened, his touch ignited sparks she could not quench. Moonlight flared unnaturally, curtains sealed shut, candles flared golden as their passion consumed the night. Her body trembled beneath his hands, torn between fear and surrender, until her whispered confession spilled out. She wanted him, desperately. With reverence and hunger, Alex Xavier answered her plea, and their union burned long into the night, sealing what words alone could never hold. By morning, Bernice awoke trembling, her reflection painted with crimson traces of passion. She tried to dismiss it as a fleeting mistake, but Alex Xavier would not allow it. To him, their night was no accident, no indulgence. It was love, binding and eternal. He teased her mercilessly, reminding her of her cries and pleas, cornering her with both tenderness and desire until her silence betrayed the truth. Even as she sought refuge in the bath, he followed, washing her with reverence, his voice coaxing her to admit what her body could not hide. Bernice's pride clashed with the warmth of his devotion, yet his words lingered. I love you. I always have. And I will never stop listening to the truth your heart speaks. By morning, the palace hummed with whispers. Maids lingered in corners, trading secrets about the sounds that had carried through the Duchess's chambers, the cries that shattered her reputation for restraint. But gossip in the ducal estate was dangerous, and when the chamber guard appeared, their chatter fell silent. Allowed inside at last, they found Duke Alexander stepping from the bath, towel hanging loose, while Bernice sat before her mirror, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders. Their bows went unacknowledged, her reflection betrayed only tension, her stormy gaze fixed not on them but on the man behind her. When their hands faltered over the crimson marks at her throat, Bernice snatched the concealer herself, dismissing them with a sharp excuse. The atmosphere shifted when Princess Sylvia swept in, smiling with dangerous satisfaction. She teased Bernice mercilessly, insisting her passion had echoed through the palace. Bernice snapped back in denial, yet Sylvia would not relent. She spoke of Alexander's devotion, of how he had searched for Bernice tirelessly, how even his cursed blade, Noxua, had once abandoned him in anguish. Bernice faltered, recognizing the sword's true name. Sylvia recalled how it had seemed almost alive, rebelling when forced to slaughter innocents. But Bernice's mistrust cut deep. She confessed she had died twice already, once executed in disgrace and once betrayed in her own marriage bed. Sylvia was shaken, but fragments stirred in her own memory, dreams of a realm she had never seen, voices calling her princess. Bernice pressed her to silence, but suspicion had already taken root. Perhaps Sylvia, too, bore ties to heaven. Seeking clarity, Bernice summoned Arios, the holy blade, and commanded it to take her to the heavenly realm. Though it hesitated, she silenced its doubts, and in a shimmer of light the celestial library opened before her. Shelves of drifting tomes surrounded her, memory itself woven into the air. A glowing volume descended into her hands, and at its touch, she was torn through time. She beheld Aurelia, her own reflection in a younger form, racing through sunlit courtyards with companions, Marcus, a boy named Arthur, and another girl whose likeness mirrored Sylvia. Aurelia's fire burned brightest, her hunger for forbidden knowledge leading her into the shadows of the library, where she discovered a tome of dark magic. Its pages whispered of resurrection, demanding a god's full strength and a life for a life. Marcus recoiled in horror, but Aurelia, defiant, vowed she would use it when someone worthy needed saving. Even across time, her gaze locked with Bernice's, as though she saw her watching. Bernice's dread deepened as Aurelia pressed her teacher, the god of the moon, for truth. Reluctantly, he told of a heavenly official who had once broken her oath, resurrecting a mortal and vanishing with him, leaving behind only a child marked with her crest. Aurelia's curiosity flared, and soon after, she demanded leave from the Supreme Mother to descend to the mortal world. Against her better judgment, the goddess allowed it. Marcus watched from the shadows, his dread hardening into resolve. The vision dissolved, and Bernice returned to the library's endless shelves, shaken. She declared to the guardian that another heavenly princess lived in the mortal world, Sylvia. The words summoned Marcus himself, his fury echoing through the hall. But Bernice pressed harder, demanding the truth of his sister's fate. His voice broke as he confessed that Sylvia had once taken her own life before his eyes, choosing death rather than watch him fall. Banished back to the mortal realm, Bernice awoke trembling. The weight of revelation pressed heavily, Aurelia's defiance, Sylvia's hidden past, Marcus's grief. Yet no answers came. Sylvia entered soon after, her warmth unchanged, but beneath their exchange ran a dangerous current. Together they traced threads of intrigue back to the imperial court, to Empress Jessica's murder and Princess Vixara's shadowy hand. Bernice resolved that truth must be unearthed, and Sylvia pledged to aid her. But Marcus was not finished. Appearing before Sylvia, he claimed her again as his sister. Her anger erupted, she spat that he had tormented and blackmailed her, that she would never accept the chains of heaven. Her tears fell as she rejected him utterly. She was mortal, born of love, not divine will. She fled into her chamber, leaving Marcus in hollow silence. Sending a desperate letter to his empire, he resolved to return before all he had built unraveled. Sylvia, meanwhile, felt a strange foreboding. A presence stirred in her heart, whispering of a girl yet unseen. Without delay, she sought Crown Prince Maximus, announcing her sudden return to her empire. Though unsettled, he relented, and she departed that very night. Her journey was relentless, pushing her horse through wind and darkness until she reached the hidden cave of her homeland. Only when a healer emerged did the gates allow her passage. Within, chaos reigned, concubine Feng Mei writhed in labor while handmaidens clamored around her. Sylvia's fury cut through the chamber, reminding all of her place as princess. The emperor himself appeared, surprised yet relieved at her return, but Sylvia's eyes remained cold. She demanded to see her mother suffering with her own eyes, and though resistance flared, the emperor silenced them, granting her entry. As Sylvia stepped into the birthing chamber, the cries of Feng Mei pierced her heart, but defiance barred her way. The head maid, voice steady, declared her loyalty to her mistress above all else, even above the princess herself. Sylvia stood unflinching before the birthing chamber, her voice sharp as steel against the insolent head maid. With a shove, she forced the woman to kneel, commanding the attendants to unveil concubine Feng Mei. The cry of a newborn pierced the air, and the doctor presented a blood-covered boy, yet Sylvia's gaze never softened. She noted the concubine's spotless gown, the faint trail of blood leading to a hidden door, and the farce unfolded before her eyes. Accusing Feng Mei of deception, she called forth all women who had labored that day. When one stepped forward empty-armed, Sylvia's case was sealed. Before the court she declared the child false, born not of Feng Mei but of treachery. The emperor's fury erupted, and guards dragged the concubine and her accomplices away as the chamber descended into chaos. In the dungeon, Feng Mei's pleas turned to venom, her mask of innocence shattered. Sylvia confronted her coldly, extracting the truth. Vengeance had driven her schemes, a legacy of blood between empires. Yet Sylvia met her hatred with defiance, vowing the throne would not fall to shadows. Emerging from the cell, she ordered the armies prepared, her eyes already fixed beyond her empire's borders. Allies were needed, and her mind turned to Crown Prince Maximus. A letter was dispatched with urgency. The council was summoned in the night. Ministers trembled as Sylvia revealed the concubine's confession of an imminent dawn raid. Her command was firm, no more interrogations, only preparations. Though doubts lingered, she assured them Maximus's forces marched already. When he arrived in person, breathless from haste, her relief was tempered by sharp words. This was survival, not affection. Yet his devotion stirred something she struggled to suppress. Their exchange drew the empress's scorn, the mother's fury barbed with accusations. Sylvia countered with cutting truths, turning suspicion upon her mother's silence during Feng Mei's deceit. The chamber grew tense, mother and daughter locked in dangerous stalemate. Later, in the throne room, Sylvia cornered the empress fully, tearing open long-buried secrets. She spoke of the son her mother had once conceived, of the doctor bribed into silence, of the life ended before it began. The empress roared in denial, but Sylvia's words struck deep, leaving her trembling with rage. That night, Sylvia rode to the ridges, clad in armor, as the enemy emerged from the sands. Maximus fought at her side, and together they shattered the dawn raid. Victory crowned her, the emperor himself placing the title of crown princess upon her brow. Cheers shook the capital, yet Sylvia's eyes found the empress in the crowd, her face darkened with silent fury. The triumph did not cool the storm. Confronting her mother after the ceremony, Sylvia pressed harder, hinting at proof yet unspoken. She descended then to the dungeons, where Feng Mei rotted and the captured sub-captain resisted in chains. With ruthless precision, Sylvia struck at his weakness, his family. Desperation broke him, and he confessed, pouring names and secrets onto parchment. Satisfied, Sylvia tightened her grip on every thread of the conspiracy, even as Feng Mei hissed her curses from the shadows. When she returned, Maximus awaited, stern yet protective. He urged her to return before suspicion mounted, but she insisted her task was unfinished. Their words blurred into touches, his lips brushing her hand, his charm unrelenting. Later that night, he pulled her suddenly into darkness, his body trembling. Breathless, he confessed he had been drugged, an aphrodisiac burning through his veins. He pleaded for her presence, for her to anchor him lest he lose control. Suspicion warred with desire, yet when his lips claimed hers, fire drowned her restraint. Their mouths clashed, breaths ragged, nails and hands seizing. His body pressed to hers, desperate and fevered, and though he swore he would not force her, she surrendered willingly, her own hunger answering his. Against the stone wall, their whispered taunts and gasps intertwined, an unspoken vow forged in heat. The empire had crowned her its heir, but that night in Maximus's arms, Sylvia realized the battles of power and desire were only just beginning. Crown Prince Maximus seized Sylvia in a storm of hunger, his lips devouring hers as his grip locked her against the wall. "Your Highness, please, take it slow," she gasped, but his voice was a growl, ragged with desire. "This is beyond my control. From the moment you stepped into this chamber, I have burned to claim you. Even now I restrain myself when every breath begs me to be inside you." Her protests dissolved into ragged cries as their passion consumed the night, unaware that every sound fed into a scheme brewing beyond those walls. The Empress, watching her pond made quiver before her, smirked. "You gave him the water," she pressed. "Yes, Your Majesty," the girl stammered, just as ordered. The threat in the Empress's eyes silenced her further. When dawn came, she stood before the Emperor in false tears. "Your heir has betrayed you," she whispered. She shared the Crown Prince's bed before marriage. The walls themselves echoed their cries. Fury drove the Emperor to Maximus's quarters, where the Crown Prince admitted his desire for Sylvia but revealed the truth, that he had been drugged, used as a weapon to destroy her. "I suspect the Empress," he said coldly. And when the Emperor confronted her, her schemes laid bare, his wrath struck her down. Stripped of her title, dragged to the dungeons to rot beside concubine Feng Mei, she was left broken and disgraced. Summoning Sylvia, the Emperor revealed his choice. He had prayed for a son, yet none came, and now his daughter would inherit the empire. At first shocked, then radiant with hope, Sylvia bowed as he declared her crown princess. Yet even as joy swelled in her heart, Maximus pressed her again, desperate to bind her to him. She refused, duty anchoring her to her people, and so he left in silence. But as she turned from her father's chamber, a familiar, suffocating presence engulfed her. Marcus, the supreme god, appeared, pulling her into visions of a forgotten past. She was no mere mortal princess but the heavenly princess, his sister, who once loved another god, one bearing Maximus's very face. And Marcus, in his madness, had slain that god, slaughtered the heavens, and driven his sister to take her own life, her soul cast into the mortal world. The truth shattered Sylvia, who recoiled from Marcus's pleas. "You are no brother of mine," she cried. "You are a murderer. I will never return." While Sylvia reeled, far away Bernice confronted a reflection of herself, Aurelia, her celestial half. Their union revealed the truth of her curse. She was heir to the heavens, punished through endless cycles of death and rebirth, bound to mortality by Aurelia's rebellion for love. The one sustaining that cycle was none other than Duke Alexander Agnes. His desperate devotion had bent time itself, dragging Bernice back again and again, trapping her in suffering while sparing her from final death. Visions of her past lives confirmed it, each cruel and undone by Alexander's grief. His love turned defiance. When Bernice perished once more, Alexander's rage shattered the palace. His blade fell upon all who stood in his path, mother and princess alike, until he cradled her lifeless body and vowed to defy even the gods. Offered a bargain, he surrendered his memory to turn back time, resurrecting her once more. But Aurelia's final revelation cut deeper. She too had fallen for Alexander long ago, defied the heavens to save him, and in that rebellion had been struck down, her essence splintered into Bernice. Now the cycle closed. Bernice and Aurelia merged, mortal and divine threads weaving into wholeness once more. Aurelia returned to the celestial realm, no longer only the god she had been but a being tempered by love, grief, and human fragility. As the heavens roared their welcome, the supreme god Aurelia returns, she stood reborn, a ruler who carried not only divine wisdom but the bittersweet truths of mortal hearts. And so began a reign that might finally bridge the gulf between heaven and earth, forged from a love fierce enough to defy fate itself.